As a preliminary matter, I'm Dawn Holgate, Chair of the Nantucket Select Board. Please permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. I will call your names in the order in which I see you. Members first, Matt Fee.
Yes.
Jason Bridges.
Here.
Melissa Murphy.
Here.
Christy Ferrantella.
Here.
Thank you. And then I will go through the town staff members that are present. Brian Turbot.
Present.
Ken Bogrand.
Present.
Tucker Holland.
Present.
Debbie Dilworth. I see you talking. Libby Gibson.
Present.
David Gray.
Present.
Erica Mooney.
In attendance.
Janet Schulte.
Here.
Vincent Murphy.
Here.
Roberto Santamaria. Rachel Day.
Here.
Tucker Holland.
Still here.
Oh, sorry. You switched around on me. Tom Rafter.
Here.
And then we have John Giorgio from Town Council.
Here.
People are jumping around my screen. Martha Turk is here to discuss the census.
Here.
David Gray, I think did I skip you? David is there somewhere.
Yeah, you got me once. Yep.
Did I So good evening. This open meeting of the Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the Governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and they are encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting of the Select Board will feature public comment. And that is done through Zoom webinar, where you can sign in as an attendee, or you can type in questions under the Q&A.
Hand.
Okay, you have to raise your hand, and you do have to use your own name and wait for the chair to recognize you. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that folks may be able to see your screen if you share it. Anything you broadcast would be captured by the recording. All of our meeting materials are on the town website on the Select Board page, and you're encouraged to follow along. I will go through the agenda and introduce each speaker, and then as people raise their hands, call on them when appropriate. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly for accurate minutes. Please wait for the chair to yield the floor to you before speaking. And finally, we will be taking all of our votes by roll call. So I was a little bit rusty on that after 2 weeks off. So anyway, I don't believe that there are any changes to the agenda. We will go over to announcements. I'll turn it over to the town manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think there might be one change that came in moments ago, which I think is that the Sandy Petals item is off.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry about that.
Not quite ready for that yet. The town email was down till just a short time ago, since about 11 o'clock this morning. So if things have come in today about agenda items, it's quite possible that we haven't even had a chance to see it yet, just FYI. So first off, the meeting is being video and audio recorded, as we know. The census update. Martha Turk is going to give us a brief update. Thank you, Martha, for coming on.
Sure, thanks for having me. The census self-response rate has not been updated by the Census Bureau since census takers started going door to door, and the hyper-local statistics that we were able to get until that point are no longer available. It's kind of frustrating. We're still urging everyone to complete the census by September 30th for their Nantucket address if they haven't yet done so, because we estimate that we're about 75% of the way to a complete count, which is a complete count of year-round households, I should say. But we need all households to be counted. Census takers are still out in the field following up with households that haven't yet responded. In some cases, they are still following up with households who have completed the census to clarify or verify information. And since Title 13 of US law protects their privacy, people's privacy, they don't know if this is the purpose of their visit. They do understand that it can be frustrating, but it's an important part of getting a complete count. All full-time and seasonal households need to be counted, and census takers are here to help. So please welcome them and work with them to ensure that Nantucket gets the funding and representation we deserve for the next 10 years. Despite the recent order by a federal judge to stop winding down in-person counting efforts, we are also operating with a September 30 response deadline. And you can work with a census taker, take the census yourself online, and over the next few weeks, we'll have a couple of additional opportunities to get help. The Census Bureau is holding what they call mobile questionnaire assistance centers for the next 2 Saturdays on the island. Bureau representatives will be at Don Allen Ford and at the Old South Road Playground on September 12th and 19th, observing all protocols and carrying official ID and devices so that they can be identified. They'll be doing exactly what our census takers are doing, but you can go to them on your own time. It's a public service. It's meant to be a helpful resource, and they'll be available at Don Allen from, I think, about 8:30 until noon, and at the playground, they'll be there from about 9 until 2 o'clock the next 2 Saturdays. And finally, I just want to let you all know that you should check out the display of wire-faced sculptures in the entry area of the Sparks Avenue Stop and Shop beginning tomorrow. They were created earlier this summer by participants in a free family workshop at the Artists Association. AAN will host another free workshop on the 19th from 10 to noon, and you can see your work displayed there next week if you participate. Information about the workshop is at nantucketarts.org. So thanks to Ted Miller at Stop and Shop, and thanks to the Artists Association for helping raise awareness about the importance of the census. And that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Martha. Okay, next we have a very special event. Our retiring assessor, Debbie Dilworth, is on. I asked her to prepare a multi-slide PowerPoint outlining her 36 years of service with the town, but it doesn't appear as though she felt like working on that because I haven't seen it. But I wanted to say a few words in honor of Deb Dilworth. When I started working for the town, Deb, I think you were in and out of having children, and you were with the town, and you did work from home, and over the years, you moved offices around. You've probably been in almost every office in the town building as the assessor, but made the rounds to all the different offices, but almost anyway. And I want to really say that you have always been very kind, supportive, informative. No matter what question I had, you were able to give me the answer or tell me where I could get the answer. And you are incredibly respected throughout the state and taught classes, which is a huge reflection on your credibility and expertise and knowledge of assessing. You're well known throughout the state and consulted frequently by other assessors with questions or dilemmas or difficulties. We had a lot of fun riding to Rotary together on Wednesdays. Most recently, sometimes Ken joined us and others. And you've been through, let's see here, maybe 3 or 4 finance directors. I can't even recall, but we now have one that is sticking. Thank you, Brian. And you have had to pitch in a lot of different ways outside of being the assessor. And I really tremendously appreciate your service and your work. And I'm really going to miss you. And I have your phone number, so I will not hesitate to text you or call you if I need to. So thank you. And really appreciate having worked with you.
Thanks, Libby. I'm not very good at Zoom.
I think you're okay.
Am I on?
Yes, you are.
We can
Oh,
hear you.
okay. Well, my apologies. I had emailed a 36-slide PowerPoint this morning, and that may be what crashed the email server.
Oh, yes,
So
right.
I'm very, very sorry. But the feelings are mutual. I've enjoyed working for the town since 1982, which makes me feel really, really old. And I'll miss everybody, but I look forward to seeing everybody in a different role, and certainly on the way to Rotary, for sure, with you and Ken. And I think Mr. Turbot is the 7th finance director. He's probably not as good as the last acting finance director that you had in 2014, but I think he's a keeper. But I've really enjoyed my run with the town, and I truly appreciate all your kind words. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're sorry we can't all give you hugs and handshakes and or fanfare.
That's okay. I appreciate it. I'm feeling the love.
We do actually have a plaque for you.
Oh my goodness.
It's coming, and we will figure out how to somehow get it to you in a socially distanced, sanitary manner, but we'll look forward to that day.
Well, I look forward to getting it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thanks, guys.
Looks like we have one more announcement.
Sorry, yes, I got carried away there. We have, maybe Melissa might want to take over a little bit for this. We have an announcement for a committee appointment coming up at the board meeting on September 23rd. This is for a vacant HDC associate seat. The deadline for applications will be Friday, September 18th. We have started meeting internally about the committee appointment process, and we hope by early October-ish or mid-October, sometime in there, that we will be able to present something to the board for your discussion. And we came up with something here. This isn't normally how we would deal with a committee appointment that's kind of mid-year. But Melissa, were you going to say more about that? Or?
Sure, I'm happy to. I think that you summarized it really well. We're meeting internally to review all of the public feedback we received on the committee and appointment process. Also looking at some other towns on the Cape and their policies. I think we all agree it is time for our board to create a policy on appointments to boards and commissions that really clarify timelines, that these are actually not public hearings per se, but there is opportunity for the public to submit comments to the board on applicants, and the somewhat casual way that we would fill vacancies that would work for the most part to help us secure seats in a time when we weren't getting a lot of applicants. That process really needs to be tightened up. And so we're using this HDC appointment to test out how this could work in terms of notifying the public at this meeting today when the application process will be. Those applications will be public. And if anyone has feedback, both positive and in the area of concerns, they're welcome to email the chair and or Erica, who will submit those comments to us. And, I think there's some question or some debate about how to appropriately vote in the time of Zoom. And we all agreed that for this upcoming appointment, the way that we did the latest Concom appointment is the most appropriate because it allows for the timestamp record of votes being received by Erica at the time that the chair asks us to send our votes in, and there's no appearance of collusion or inappropriateness by board members. So when we do vote on September 23rd, it's our hope that, Don, you will conduct it the same way that you did the second Conservation Commission and open seat vote. I think that was on June 17th. Other than that, I think we've got some great feedback and we should have a draft policy to review.
To one other quick thing too, maybe, if the board would like, we could let you know, right now, we have one applicant. It is Angus McLeod, and this is for a seat that expires in 2021. Just a little more info.
Thank you. And the any applicants, if they've come in by the 18th, those will be posted in the packet that day so that people will have the weekend and up until the Wednesday meeting to review who's applied in terms of the publication of the names.
Yes, and Erica can correct me, but I think the application deadline is noon on Friday so that it does have time to be processed and put in the board packet.
That's correct.
Great. Thank you. There's one other announcement that came in. I guess we should have said this at the beginning about the agenda. We've gotten a proclamation request from the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee, our committee, and Acclimate Nantucket to request that September 2020 be proclaimed Climate Change Awareness Month. If anybody maybe wants to read
Would you like me to read that?
Sure.
Whereas the town of Nantucket recognizes that climate change and rising sea levels pose a threat to Nantucket's shores, and whereas the Select Board formed the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee in part to assist with obtaining community feedback on climate change and sea level rise, and whereas in 2020, the town of Nantucket is beginning the planning process for coastal resilience by developing a coastal resilience plan, and whereas in 2020, the town of Nantucket, through a municipal vulnerability preparedness grant, is developing a resilient Nantucket toolkit for adapting historic resources for sea level rise. And whereas Climate Nantucket provides a platform for the public-private partnership between the community organizations and town of Nantucket on issues of resilience and sustainability. And whereas Climate partner organizations are hosting a series of educational events in September 2020 that will feature climate change topics. Now, therefore, jointly, the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee and Climate call upon the Select Board of Town of Nantucket to proclaim September 2020 Climate Change Awareness Month. We, the Select Board of the Town of Nantucket and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, do hereby officially proclaim the month of September 2020 as Climate Change Awareness Month, and do hereby encourage all residents to learn more about the threats of climate change and sea level rise and the planning efforts underway to increase community resilience. This will be signed this 9th day of September 2020. Thank you.
Do you want a motion or was that just agreed upon?
Do we need a
Motion?
motion?
Yeah, might as well vote it.
So
Yeah.
moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor by roll call: Matt Fee,
Aye.
Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Thank you. Thanks for putting that together. COVID-19 weekly update. Are there any opening comments from the board? Then we will move to Nantucket Cottage Hospital and our public health director. I'm not sure who wants to go first, Gary or Roberto.
Oh, I'm happy to have Roberto step in, and then I have some comments as well. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and share the screen if it lets, it's not, there you go. Okie dokie. So we'll go ahead and start with the select board COVID-19 report. And there has been some changes afoot. There's a change from what you received in the packet earlier this week. So first off, this information that we have on this slide is based on information we had yesterday, which was good information. Out of the 7,225 cases, 2,635 were self-pay or through the CastNet, and we still only had 63 cases. But as of today, we received, as of about an hour or two ago, we received the positive cases for the day, and we have 7 new cases today. So what is really important for all of us to understand is that this is brand new information. We are just getting it. We are in the process of doing the contact tracing, getting the information, and doing any locality tests, checking for clusters, checking where all these people were, how they got it, and every sort of exposure. So I'll continue through, and then Gary and I will be happy to answer questions at the end, because this changes a few things. So really quick, over the past week, we've seen a regular basic rise in the cumulative incidence rate. Our rate has definitely started going up. We are seeing, if we were to look at an overall trend from the very beginning, I'll start mapping that out, and I'll be putting that in graphs for you later for next week's meeting. What you're going to see is that we're technically in a spike right now, and things are starting to change. But what's really important is that if we maintain the vigilance, we maintain mask wearing, we maintain the orders, we can beat this. This is just a hiccup right now. It's really important to understand that. So if you see in slide number 2, we'll know by September 21st how the large crowds over the weekend, if they were spreader events. We don't know if today's 7 cases are attributed to any event on the weekend, but it is on the earliest range of the first exposures, if exposure were to happen on Friday, have happened on Friday. So that's why you'll see the first button as yellow. It's only because of today's information. I switched to that only about 20 minutes ago. But using yesterday's data, that was green. So what we're saying is we want to keep that number below 10%, where at the time it was at 0.87, which still is below 1%. Even with today's 7 cases, it will still be below 1%, because almost 200 tests were done in this period of time from when I wrote this report to when it came out today. If you look at today's update from the Cottage Hospital, it's a 7,400 tests. So just doing the quick and dirty math, 7,400 is only 0.95%. So we're still under a 1% of the total cases. So it's still really important to understand that, and that we're looking at that. And more information will be coming out over the next few days about these cases. Everything else still seems pretty green across the board, and we should be moving forward. Here we go. As promised, more information. Now that we hit that 50-person threshold, which we kind of blew by, actually. I'll be able to show more information on the metrics. These are the two graphs that I showed last time about 2 weeks ago when we had just passed the 50 mark with the age breakdown and the sex breakdown of those 63 cases. As we saw before, the great majority of all of our cases are people below the age of 40. So that is the targeted response that we're trying to get to. And then we'll start getting into larger breakdowns. So right now you'll see that we have a race breakdown, and what we're seeing is that over 50% of all our cases are white non-Hispanic males. And I will start stratifying this data a little bit more as I can get more in depth with the data and the data. Actually, I always say it wrong. When I start going through the data and looking at the data points, I'll be able to stratify this information and get you how many cases in each age group set by sex in other graphs. I'll be able to get that information to you. That I'm trying to get into a much larger, I guess, kind of an after action report overseeing the last 6 months of work. Point of origin. We love to say cases are coming in from off island. Cases are coming in from people who aren't paying attention to Massachusetts rules. Almost half of all our cases are from Massachusetts. So it's and of that 46%, the great majority of them are actually Nantucketers or actually Nantucket cases. So it's really important. These are local people. We are responsible for our own health. So we've been discussing personal responsibility, and this is a major display of that. And it's been really good. I'm not trying to sound like I'm chastising or talking to anyone. This is just the information that's getting out there. So when we compare ourselves to the state, it's still going very well. You'll see on the bottom left screen the average daily incidence rate per 100,000 cases, the standardized incidence ratio. You'll see that in the state that Nantucket is actually yellow. That's because over the course of those 14 days, the previous 14 days, this is actually last week's chart. So it uses a lot of all the August data. In those 14 days, we had seen about 6 cases. So when you extrapolate that, it pops it out into a larger number. So you're going to see this as yellow again next week as well. And with today's cases, we'll be seeing it yellow, possibly even red in the one after that. That is not a reason to panic. It is just it's for informational purposes. Nantucket is still in a very good situation. We just need to keep an eye on where we are with today's cases. You'll see that on the county statistics on the right, that Nantucket is still the lowest in the state. The reason it says 45 and ours are, at the time when I pulled this information, ours was at 63, is because we're also counting cases. We're counting all the cases that we get positive at the portico here. So having it all count as positive, we are able to do a more robust contact tracing effort, even if they were only here for 1 day and the case technically counts in another county. We are still counting it ourselves in order to have a more robust and a safer way of approaching the COVID response. Next steps that we're looking at is, as always, maintain vigilance. And with the schools opening soon, we all really have to work together. We're going to pay attention to what is going on with today's cases and contact trace there and see how that goes. And I will be in contact with the schools if they are involved with anything here on how to respond to any of this. But right now we have to just stay the course, pay attention to the rules that the schools have worked so hard to develop. Dr. Hallett has really lifted up, has really moved mountains with this. So it's really important to just monitor and pay attention. And just the big one for everyone watching, pay attention to the gathering rules. These are 2 newspaper headlines that you'll see. News headlines. Newspaper doesn't really exist much anymore, does it? What you're seeing is the top one is the Maine wedding that we've been hearing a lot about, and that happened last month, and that's as of 9/6, which was 3 days ago. And then the Sturgis rally, which was only about a week or two ago, or a couple weeks ago now, is responsible for close to 250,000 cases. So it's really important to pay attention to this. Or else, step number 3 is what Boris Johnson just passed in England. We're hoping that Charlie Baker doesn't do something like that, where in England, they are limiting gatherings to 6. There are families on island that are bigger than 6. So we really have to just stay the course, do your part. And then with this, I'll turn it off. What I'm trying to say is stay the course, do your part. You'll start seeing this here, where it says do your part, save a life. Because the more we get complacent, the less we pay attention to the rules. And we say rules, but they're not. Rules is for lack of a better word. They're all suggestions, but these suggestions are there to save lives, and the lives that are there to be saved are in our own families. I have family infected with COVID right now in another country, and they're fighting. She's doing her part to fight. She's 93 years old, and she's surviving. She survived it. So it's really important that if we do our part, we can all get through this. And I think these 7 cases is not something people should really get too scared about. If we do our part, we wear our masks, we wash our hands, we pay attention to social distancing, and we don't gather in large groups, we can still beat this thing. And we can still have the economy, and we can still have the school year that everyone is hoping to have. So with that, I'll throw it over to Gary. He always lightens it up a little bit. I'm always just the heavy. So Gary, please have fun.
Well, I mean, facts are facts, right? So maybe covering a little bit of what the summer's looked like. First, I want to say that from the community perspective, people coming over here, I'm actually very, very happy for the results that we have. To have, I don't know how many thousands of people come back and forth, plus have our residents here, and to have this low ratio is certainly a good outcome. But it's happening most likely because there are people here, and those that come here, that use diligence that Roberto just talked about. And I won't say what they are. We all know what they are. We've been dealing with this as a team for 6 months. But the reality is, this is a disease and an infection that is not going to leave anytime soon. And we have to know that to coexist in this and be able to have an economy and have an opportunity to get out of our homes and enjoy our lives, we have to learn how to navigate a world that has this in it safely until there are vaccines or antivirals that either cut the severity or eliminate this to a level that we wouldn't be so worried about it. But we're just not there yet. And so the reason that we have spread, if we do have spread, is I'll give it to you like this. Dr. Pearl, who can't be on tonight, wanted me to share what she just received from another physician colleague that kind of describes some of the risk. And this is about the use of a mask. So if you have a COVID-19 carrier without a mask who comes to a person that's a healthy person with a mask, the statistics are the probability that that person would acquire that illness is 70%. So that's an infected person with no mask, aerosolizing. Even if you have a mask, 70% probability you could come down with the illness. But if you have a COVID-19 carrier with a mask who's next to a person who's healthy without a mask, the probability is 5%. So from 70 to 5. And if you have a COVID-19 carrier with a mask and a healthy person with a mask, the probability is 1.5%. So I think that goes to show that creating a barrier, something between healthy and non-healthy, works, as well as hand washing, as well as social distancing and not having density. I've been telling people recently, this is a social disease. When people cluster, when people think that they're out of the woods, that's usually when they're most at risk because the behaviors change. And I think that we have to not only say that to ourselves, those that are on this Zoom, but to all of our people on this island, be constantly vigilant. We need to have this in multiple languages. We need to have people from the Interfaith Council getting access to folks that are here that don't want to be known they're here. If you're a human being on this island, we should be able to get information out that helps you understand what the risks are, no matter where you live. So continuing to focus and punch holes through silence or lack of information is something that's key. So that's where we sit with COVID. I am still encouraged, even though we have this cluster, because what we have are very robust tracing programs, a very robust, I think, state of the art, if not in the country, certainly Massachusetts, the PCR testing program, and you're supporting it, and the ability for people to drive through at any time and be looked at to see if they have COVID is amazing. And the fact that we've stayed at the very front end of the Broad MIT Institute for testing, and our test results are coming back within 12 to 24 hours is simply amazing. And I don't think there's anyone else in the state that's been able to get those tests back so quickly. So that helps, Roberto, that helps us really focus on where there's a hotspot in a cluster, because we get things almost in real time. And then in the hospital, if we have patients that need to screen for surgery, or they're in trauma and they've got to go for surgery, we have the ability with our Cepheid analyzer to do testing and get results in 45 minutes, they're fantastic tools for us here to be able to use. So I would say this is a point of concern. It's a point of a re-initiation of discussion around what does protection look like. Being visible, being aware, even at a point where we know there's not as many people on the island, we still know that there are lots of folks here working together, traveling together, living together, and they're still at risk. It takes one case, as we know, when you're in a dense environment to spread. So that's the COVID component. The other component of this is vaccines. We are optimistic, as our president would say, that there would be an effective vaccine out soon. Let's hope that that's reality and that it is an effective vaccine. It'll certainly be welcomed by myself and I think everyone in the country. But until that occurs, vaccines that help prevent other diseases such as influenza are crucial. And so at the Cottage Hospital, we started early, several months ago, looking at what could the flu season become this year. And folks have asked me, why is it so important to get a flu shot, when you're really focused on COVID? Well, COVID destroys your lungs. COVID destroys your ability to exchange air. The flu plugs your lungs up. The flu creates all sorts of other things within the body. And to have the two together is certainly not even an imaginable thing. And especially for those that are at greatest risk, it could be catastrophic. To be able to get a flu shot and know that you're protected, even if the vaccine has a 70% effective rate, I want that 70%. I don't want to test COVID. I want that 70%. So in years past, the Cottage Hospital local pharmacists have generated close to 4,000 vaccines that people took. I think that the statistics are, we have somewhere between 15 to 20,000 people that year-round on the island, and anybody else that visits. So we have in hand right now almost 6,000 vaccines to start vaccinating the entire island. And tomorrow in the Inky, you'll see information come out that talks about how you can receive that. We're going to be using our drive-through portico to make that available. You just have to go to partners and register, but drive through, and that flu shot can be given right from your vehicle. If you have kids that you want the flu shot, bring them. If you have elderly, bring them. We have processes to do that safely at the portico. So we can do hundreds, at least 100 or more a day. At the portico. We can address school children that need this vaccine as directed by the governor. But please, 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 as a leader team, stress getting the flu vaccine. Also stress measles, mumps, rubella, diphtheria, tetanus, pneumovax, shingles. Those are all things that were developed to prevent these scourges that have all hit us in the past, but we don't see the great numbers now. Folks think vaccines are dangerous. They're not dangerous. They are something that you can be educated about. You can decide your own risk, but to not have the vaccine would mean that you're much more likely to get one of those illnesses, but we can prevent that. And certainly the flu is something you should consider. So please, we've put the preparation into having that happen. We're doing first responders now. We're doing, the hospital started today in 1 hour. We did 60 people in 2 hours. We had half of the staff vaccinated. We want to be healthy and safe. I think within a couple of days, we'll do 400 over here, or we might even be doing that by tomorrow. People are lining up for the flu. 16th and the 17th, first responders. That includes the Coast Guard, the police department, your folks that you consider through the towns. They can come into the emergency room and be vaccinated. We're ready for it. And so we want to make as much availability out there as possible for access. So don't let down the guard on COVID as a community that's watching this broadcast. De-densify yourselves. Step apart from one another. Help slow down if this is a cluster outbreak or a spike by getting apart from one another. If you're in a situation where you know you've been exposed to somebody, come on over and be tested and help us understand the risk so that we as a community can work through this together. I'm very proud you have the best tools in Massachusetts to work through what we're facing, even in a small cluster. It's proven itself throughout the summer. It can continue again. So keep up the march, keep that throttle pressed forward. And I'm here for any questions you have.
Questions? Thoughts? Matt?
Well, just I'm not sure if it's a question or a comment. You know, I agree with Gary. Getting the info back in 12 or 24 hours is amazing. I've had a couple different employees who have been have had tests and they've gotten them back in a day. And that makes a huge difference in them knowing, you know, if in fact they've been negative, if they were positive, they would be able to get to whoever they had been in contact with very quickly, and it would make a huge difference. So I think, you know, we've done that really well. I would say I went downtown this weekend, and I'm not surprised that we have some more, we have on-island transmission. I'm not surprised at all. The only area downtown, the 35 plus are wearing their masks, and except when they're eating. The young people are not paying attention one iota. The only place young people had masks on and they were congregated all around downtown was in the juice bar line, waiting to pick up ice cream or get ice cream. The rest of the island, you know, the rest of the sidewalks and the, you know, they were sitting everywhere they were sitting, they were no masks at all. And so that, you know, that is sort of, I left, you know, being downtown at 9 o'clock the other night thinking, this is not good. You know, this is not good for the island. You know, I give, you know, congratulations to the juice bar for getting there, you know, getting that line under control, and all of their customers were good, but the whole rest of the downtown was not. And, you know, I think that is the, you know, sort of, if we want to get back to school safely, if we want these kids to stay in school this fall, there has to be a lot more compliance on the part of our young people. And I think, you know, we've done a good job, but I think people have to realize that this is on Nantucket. It's in our community, and you know, their families and their kids have to take, you know, they have to be careful, you know. So anyway, I just think that was very clear to me. And the other thing I will say, it was a holiday weekend. And by that, when my bakers came in at 2:30 in the morning, there were 6 or 8 wandering drunk people. It was a Memorial Day type weekend at night. You know, there were people going up and down the street. If you read the police blog, there was a ton of parties going all night, Friday night and Saturday night. So when Gary is talking about us letting our guard down, that's kind of what happened this weekend. And so we need to get our guard back up if we want to, you know, get this back into control. And I hope that we as a community do that.
Jason?
Just a question for Roberto. When will the information come out? Do you have a Board of Health meeting this week, or because usually you have, you know, it's, you know, pretty quick if it's community spread or if it's somebody who's already left the island, all that kind of stuff. Will we know tomorrow through a press release, or because I think a lot of people are going to want to know?
Of course. Yeah, no, the Board of Health meeting is actually next week. I think it's next week. Just quickly look at the calendar. Yes, next week. The Board of Health meeting is next week, but what I'm going to be doing is over the case in the next week. I'm going to be releasing as much information as I can. I'll be doing the videos. We'll be doing press releases. We'll be doing joint statements with the hospital, if we have to, with the schools again, just to get the information as far and wide as possible. It's really important for the island to understand that we've been extremely successful. Our population turns over every 48 hours, if not quicker, in the summer. That is a very high level of exposure. The Cape and the Islands have more exposure than most of the cities on the mainland in Massachusetts. And the Cape and the Islands have had some of the lowest positivity rates in the whole state. Let's keep that going. And the more information we get out there, the better.
Yep, follow up.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's great, Roberto. Thank you. I know just sitting here, people are texting me because, a lot of parents are worried. Everybody's kind of on edge with school and how it's going to go. So I know you guys will get out all the information. I just, for those who are watching, that information will go out in the next couple of days with whatever we can get out there. So thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any report from the licensing administrator tonight? Libby?
Amy had to go off island for something today and is not able to be here. So what we were going to have her do is talk a bit about the gatherings order, which Roberto has referenced. We're getting a lot of inquiries, and there have been some weddings and other events that typically happen in the fall here. So we're doing some messaging, and we're going to be doing more of it in the next couple of weeks to reinforce the gatherings order does apply to private property. Private property is not exempt. The gatherings order is posted on the town website. It's on the state website. Of course, the virus does not care if you are at a private event or a public event. So be mindful of that. So she was going to talk a little bit about that. And she was going to talk a little bit about the weekend, which we kind of heard about. Outdoor dining. We're actively working on fall plans and how best to extend outdoor activities as much as possible. So that's something kind of in the works. And Roberto, I think those are most of the things we talked about. We've been having just about a weekly enforcement meeting and make sure we're all on the same page with who's doing what. And we do have our seasonal and health inspector, Roberto, I think is still with us and is actively out there doing inspections and helping with enforcement.
Yes, Madison is out there.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if you want to add anything to that. Amy will be back next week and we can talk more about this with maybe, but I guess one of our points is we're going to be increasing our messaging about this. I guess that's it.
Thank you. Fall winter community events. I think that Janet is going to take us through. Oh, Melissa?
Yeah, thank you, Don. I just had a quick question for Libby. When Amy speaks next week, I know that, and I've been just hearing from people anecdotally, September is a big month for weddings and people are reimagining their weddings and so on and so forth. Do we have a sense of what that wedding season looks like? And, if you can't answer that tonight, maybe she can help us get a sense of what that means, because I think, Roberto, you're sharing that those are, likely places for rapid transmission is very concerning. And I don't know how best to get those messages out to event planners and people in the event industry right now.
We were working on something that was going to go out to caterers, event planners, tent people, the town clerk, local churches, visitor services, the chamber, and the NARAB group, and plus department to advise tent people. So we're trying to capture all the groups we could think of that would be involved in events like weddings. I don't know if Amy will know how, what numbers we're talking about unless they were on public property, which there would really be none, or very, very limited and extremely small. But we can ask her to speak to that. Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Can I turn it over to Janet Schulte now?
I actually think that my colleague at the Chamber of Commerce is going to speak about fall events.
I will turn it over to Christy Ferrantella.
So I'll be speaking as the president of the chamber. I'm going to share my screen. Erica, is that okay?
Yep.
So the chamber's been working really closely with the town, with Janet, and with Amy Baxter and Roberto to go over some of the fall initiatives. Usually around this time of year, we're coming to the select board to talk about road closures, and we're adapting everything and wanting to review kind of how we're incorporating some of our initiatives and keeping safety front of mind. So last year we did our signature event, Cobblestones and Cranberries, and this was during Cranberry Festival weekend, held on the Sunday. It was really to encourage people to shop local, whether that was downtown or out of town. We had a little bingo card that encourages you, kind of like red tickets, for each place that you shopped at. You got a sticker, and more stickers meant more chances to win. So this year, we're going to continue that with a full weekend initiative of encouraging people to shop local, support our small businesses, dine local, whether you want to do that in person or online. We just want to keep everything as hyper-local as possible, and to give a little surge in business for all of our small businesses on island. We'll also be doing a storefront decorating contest, and that will all be online. Typically, people vote in person, so we're getting rid of that component, and we'll be focusing on how to decorate the downtown and around the island with cranberries and everything fall related, just to, bring some color to the island as we're heading into the winter season. Some ideas that we've been floating around is shutting down streets. Right now, this is all dependent on permits. So we're, again, working really closely with Amy and Marina and working out the details of if that's possible. But it would, help to have more vendors, so we could have out-of-town businesses, set up on Main Street or Federal Street. Or we've talked about having an art show just to help galleries or the Artists Association, a way to help nonprofits also have a spotlight who have suffered so much over the last couple of months. And previously, we did a wrap-up party, and this was a way to give away prizes for those who shopped locally. So if we did this, it would definitely be focused on a small gathering, so no more than 50 people. We've been talking about maybe Children's Beach, where we could have live entertainment and encourage people to have takeout. Again, everything is focused on safety, but we're trying to be creative and think of ways to help small businesses and help our restaurants make it through some of this fall with increased business and a little economic boost. If you have any questions, you can speak out at any time, or you can wait till the end. We're excited to announce a new initiative that we've worked really closely with the school and Janet and Roberto on. It's called Trunk or Treat. So this is something that we came up with because of COVID-19 and wanting to socially distance trick-or-treating this year. So we're going to be using the school parking lots to allow kids to come and basically trick-or-treat around the different cars. So vendors will, well, we're saying vendors, but people will be able to sign up to have their car, which they can decorate and have candy in, and they'll be socially distanced throughout 3 parking spots. And then we've closely looked at the parking lots and worked with Diane to lay it out so that people would enter one way and exit another. It would be timed, so people are coming in, every 3 minutes in small groups. So a big focus on social distance and safety, but giving our kids something to do this Halloween season. So again, the focus is keeping a steady flow and having tons of volunteers. So we'll have people for parking, for coordinating, making sure people are 6 feet apart. That was one of the biggest things that we want to focus on, is having enough volunteers to make sure that everybody is far apart. There'll be guidelines for the vendors who are signed up to have their cars decorated in the spots. So, no bobbing for apples, no unwrapped candy. We won't have people, sticking their hands in to get candy. It'll be passed out. So thinking of all the ways to do this safely, but again, really wanting to give our community a way to celebrate Halloween during COVID-19. So this year, the tree lighting is going to be going online, virtual. So we'll be working with NCTV to live stream this. So as of right now, we won't be requesting a street closure for this. We know it will be difficult to try to maintain that to a 50-person maximum, and it would just be difficult to enforce that. So we're going to be working to encourage people to tune in from home, looking at ways that you could snap a picture of you lighting your tree at the same time, so we can all count down together and light up the island. So we're really thinking creatively, but we will not be having the in-person tree lighting as we have in the past. So we've adapted Stroll to be a week long this year, with really a focus on small gatherings and initiatives to really spread everything out. This is not to have a very hectic week, but to spread things out, to maintain social distance, to maintain safety, and really make sure that the island is safe during that time. We're going to be focused on supporting our small business. So again, everything is focused around shopping local for the holiday season. We're trying to work with Amy and Janet, and maybe this will be select board, of having multiple marketplaces. And instead of just having one downtown at Stop and Shop, could we have them around town, maybe closing off Main Street or Federal Street? Could this be during the week? So, restaurants who will have limited capacity with outdoor dining when it's colder. If we had a Christmas marketplace or vendor across the streets, this is an idea that we're trying to work through the details and where we need approval from. But it would help restaurants and merchants if we had other ways for them to sell during this week. Adaptations for this year. We will not have a Santa parade. Obviously, that promotes congregating, and we're not doing anything that would put our community at risk. We're talking about ways to have Santa all around different businesses during that week. So maybe you could stop into Aunt Leah's Fudge and see Santa, serving fudge, or go into Murray's and he can help you pick up your Nantucket Red. So we're trying to think of ways to see Santa that week, since he won't be coming in by Coast Guard cutter. And working on a holiday wish list, kind of like a best of Nantucket, so that you can try different things at different restaurants and businesses and be able to vote for those things. And again, everything's really focused on how do we promote the local shopping, doing your holiday shopping on Nantucket, staying away from Amazon, and really trying to promote our small businesses on island. One of the things we are looking at and trying to determine the feasibility of it is a backwards parade, where people who would participate in the parade would decorate their cars and line up, and then the parade would actually be the visitors or community members driving through to view the cars. So instead of the cars driving by, you would drive by the cars. So one of those ideas is to line the route of the to the Dreamland Theater and have Christmas movies playing at the outdoor theater. So those are things that we're kind of working on really closely with Amy. I think next week we might have some more ideas as we talk with the Economic Recovery Task Force, but I know that we wanted to give an update just to keep everybody in the loop. So the Red Ticket program will continue this year. Again, we kind of need it more now more than ever, with a focus on helping small businesses, but the drawing will be virtual. Again, we don't want to close down Main Street. We don't want to promote congregating. So we'll be live streaming that on NCTV and possibly 97.7. And again, encouraging small live stream parties, maybe dining at a restaurant and watching it, or from home. And you'll be able to text a picture of your ticket. So you will not need to be present to win. So that's encouraging. So if you want to keep those red tickets all year, or you can always donate them to nonprofits as well. And lastly, New Year's Eve last year, we did a variety of community events. in programming. So this year, we're just really starting to plan this. It's still a few months away, but just trying to think of ways to, again, help restaurants and maybe promote dining right before the fireworks that are set to happen by the town. But there won't be large events like the New Year's Eve ball that was up in Nantucket Hotel as in previous years. So we're just trying to think creatively during COVID. We've had a lot of brainstorming sessions about block parties. Amy, Janet, and I feel like we meet weekly, and then we have to change the idea because the governor comes up with something new. But we're really just trying to focus on ways of how can we support small businesses and get people out shopping and dining in a safe capacity, small gatherings. So whether that's more farmers markets or street markets throughout the fall, there's ways to encourage commerce. Extension of outdoor dining, that was great to hear that is something that we're thinking about, or in any other way to support small business is really what we're focused on at the chamber. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Christy. That was really great. Jason?
Yeah, I agree, Madam Chair. It's so creative. I don't know how you come up with all those ideas. I think if things are coordinated with Amy and Roberto, and you have enough people, they can be safe. You know, the trunk or treat, what a great idea. For kids not to have, access to Halloween, it's a huge bummer. But if there's a safe way we can do it, even if it's not the same, I think it's really worth it. I mean, I've seen a lot of smaller events be really successful and really safe this year. So I know we can do it, and I really applaud you, Christy, and everybody at the chamber, and Janet, and anybody else who's worked on these things to help the businesses and still be safe and still kind of keep the community connected and kind of keep that social fabric, whatever we can, vibrant. So thank you all.
Does anybody, Matt?
Yeah, I think a lot of good ideas in there. I think the, trunk or treat I liked until I realized they're going to get out of the car and walk around, and then I worry about it a little bit. I like the idea of Christmas movies where people are in the car. I think that's great. I think we have to I worry about the expectation we set when we have this event and that event or another event. The main wedding had 60 something people. And that's not a very big event. That's not much more than the governor saying 50 now. And if we have on-island transmission, if we haven't knocked this down to, 1 or 2 people a week by these times, I think we have to be flexible and realize that we have to change it and maybe not do it. I think that, we did the right thing not having, the hospital didn't have the pops this summer. That was the right move. And we need to do that. I don't think we need to have events for Islanders to support Islanders and go to businesses. I think if the advertising is, shop local, and we hammer that home, and the chamber hammers that home all fall, I don't think it needs to be in concert with an event. And then people can be going and shopping 1 or 2 at a time, rather than, encouraging people to be, walking around and, sort of doing that. So I just think, I hope that we're in a little blip and this is fine. I don't want to be Scrooge, but at the same time, I think we have to be very, very careful. I think what happens when you have an event, Stroll, et cetera, that people have expectations. Visitors have expectations. Those expectations encourage and include a lot of alcohol, a lot of social gatherings, house to house with their friends in their neighborhoods. That stuff is all going to happen if we encourage people to come out for that. I think there's going to be a lot of people that are staying longer this fall, all the way to then. I think they're going to give the economy a boost, hopefully, especially if they're encouraged and they feel it's safe to do so. So I would caution us about, sort of thinking of this just slightly differently. Don't lead with the event, lead with the result, maybe. So,
Christy?
Thank you, Matt. I think those are all really valid concerns. And that's what we've been really focused on, is how do we create safe initiatives that can support our island. everything with the trunk or treat, masks would be required. We're really looking at how to keep this as safe as possible. And as I said, working with the town and everybody to, really think of every little detail, such as the timing of entry. We're really going to make sure that we have small groups and people are moving along, and there won't be a chance for too much interaction. In terms of Stroll, and we've been fielding a lot of questions at the chamber, and so just to give an update of what we've been doing is really stressing that it's not Stroll as usual. So it's going to be a different year. We have COVID. We tell everybody about the mask requirement downtown. We tell everybody that there won't be large gatherings, and that we want to make sure that we keep our island safe and our visitors safe. So I think that's why everything's really focused on shopping local. And so we want this message to be for the year-round people as well. It's not just for people to come to the island, but how do we encourage everybody who has been, in stay-at-home orders, which, we're still technically in. How do we encourage people to still shop, whether that is, going downtown or going out of town? Amelia Drive, everybody is really needing an extra boost. So I think I get your message of doing more advertising, but it's going to be difficult when restaurants, have colder weather without heaters. If there was outdoor vendor markets, could there be ways for them to still support and get business, and make it through? We want to see as many of these businesses come back next year. And I know it's not going to be 100%, but if we could save as many as we can, we don't want to see what we're reading in the Cape Cod Times and the Boston Globe of every restaurant closing down. I think if we can put something together that gives a little boost through the fall and the winter, it's worth something to try.
Elizabeth Trelos has her hand up. I'm going to go to her.
Excuse me, you posted a picture of the typical dory that we have with the Christmas tree and the star on it. And I think that this year, this was from 219, it said on the bottom of the dory. I think this year, our little star should have a face covering too, to really stress that this is 2020 and everybody needs to do the same.
Thank you. I like that idea.
Me too. Thank you.
Jason?
Yeah, I just want to comment or some of what Matt was saying. I think definitely really big caution on anything Stroll related, bringing people here so they don't have a gathering on their own at their own house. But I think we could get through that. The trunk or treat, is that right? Am I getting that right? I think is a brilliant idea because it can be controlled. And Matt, everybody's going to be wearing a mask. It's the only time you get kids to wear masks is on Halloween. So if it's controlled and Roberto and Amy and everybody okays it, then I think it can be very successful. And the key is it being controlled.
I'm a little bit worried about how restaurants are going to manage a Stroll weekend. I mean, I think I love the idea of it being a week. I love the idea of doing more outside markets. I mean, going to that, the market downtown this summer, they were really managing that beautifully with how they sign people in and have the hand sanitizer right there and keep you in a very controlled directional. But I worry about, I'm getting a little bit worried about the colder weather and the kind of capacity requirements that Stroll Weekend brings. I mean, those restaurants are completely overrun by people trying to get in on a normal year. I just want to figure out the best way that we can support them to try and not have those kind of crowd gatherings happening in the street, trying to get into places. Matt?
Yeah, Dawn, you're 100% correct. The other issue is I think I've heard through the grapevine that some of the restaurants are going to go for a couple more weeks, and that's going to be it for this year. As soon as it's, some of them have done well enough, perhaps, or, have broken even or lost only a little bit. And as soon as they don't have outside seating and the weather isn't conducive, they are going to shut, and they probably are not going to open. Some of them are probably not going to try to reopen for Stroll, even if we have a pared down non-Stroll. in which case then your issue will be magnified. There'll be a lot of people walking around looking for places that are open with some of the main ones not open. And if that happens, then we are hurting sort of the future strolls and the branding of the island and everything else. So these are still some issues to work through. And I think we have to be flexible.
Melissa?
Thanks. And I agree with what everybody has said so far. And I do trust that Janet and Christy and Amy are receiving feedback from businesses about what their needs are in terms of business and support. And that's really the Chamber's central role. And, Christy, I think the plans that you've outlined are all really reflexive and adaptable. So it'll be great to keep everybody posted on what these plans look like, and that we're responsive to community safety first, but then also to what the businesses are asking for in terms of support, how best we can do that to give everybody a successful season. So thank you. Your presentation was great.
Christy?
Thank you. I just want to add one other thing about feedback, and similar to what Matt's been saying, we've been hearing that restaurants want to close, relatively shortly, if not after Columbus Day weekend, but would be interested in doing those outside vendor markets where they could have, a few items on a menu, and still be able to participate in the whatever type of initiatives happen that week. So it is something that restaurants seemed interested in, even if they do close early.
Thank you. Do we have any additional economic recovery task force updates?
You
Janet?
do. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to comment that I think the creativity of the Chamber's planning initiatives for the fall activities really focuses on the theme of small gatherings spread over time. So it changes the numerator and the denominator, and I think that's a good signal for how the Chamber's really caring about limiting the size of groups that are gathering and how long they're gathering and where they're gathering. I would also say that the school has been incredibly supportive of this event, and if anybody knows how to take care of kids and their physical health and their emotional health as well, they jumped right on board when I sent an email and said, do you think we could use the parking lots for trunk or treat? And so they've been on all with that. So I'll turn now to the Economic Recovery Task Force. Everything is happening tomorrow. We have a follow-up on the Economic Recovery Task Force meeting. We will be asking them for their comments on what they thought of the summer, what worked well, what could be improved, what might be considered to be continued in the future. We will ask them for any other suggestions they have that to support businesses about moving forward into the shoulder season and even the post-holiday season for sort of online activity and how we might be able to support that. And then Christy will be reviewing the fall events with them there as well for their feedback on that activity. So we'll have more information for you next week about what we heard. And then the other thing that's happening tomorrow is the second survey of the economic impact of COVID-19 is going to be distributed. We did one in April. That served as a baseline and helped to inform some of the recommendations that came forward in May. We will be repeating that to get a sense of what the delta was and how close people were able to project what the impact was going to be. Some we know fared well, some fared less well, some came out even. And we're hoping that this data will tell us something about what we can do to move forward with the fall and how many folks are planning to either maybe sell or move the way that their businesses operate into next summer, so that we'll be able to start thinking a good 9 months out about what it is we need to have a sustainable experience for visitors in terms of our economic activity on the island. That's being funded by Remain, and we're using the same consulting group to write the survey and analyze it as we used in April.
Thank you, Janet. We'll look forward to more information as those results come out.
That survey will start tomorrow, and we'll keep it open until the 25th of September. We'll go to some 800 email addresses.
Great, thank you. We probably don't have anything further on the emergency orders and public information update.
I'm not sure how, I think we're still getting quite a few hits on the town website. We are working to get it updated on a regular basis. And like I said, we were working last week on increasing the messaging about gatherings. As far as town offices go, they're not technically open for the public to come in. The Registry of Motor Vehicles did open, what's today? Yesterday. And it is by appointment only. So please be aware of that. There was kind of a rush of people down here yesterday morning about 8 o'clock, but registry actually had an officer over here and that seemed to work. So we are talking about opening more town offices up for appointment only as well. Some are already open for that. And again, we are not getting any complaints that people are not being served because we have people working, whether there's very few people working remotely now, town employees, some may still be, but they are working. And we are ready to serve anybody who needs anything. But like I said, I think we are going to look at more. I'm looking around to find my pen, which that's why I'm moving around a lot. We're looking at more appointment-only opportunities, and we are still very much paying attention to what the governor says, which there's constant reminders. We still have a safer at home advisory, and the advice is unless you have to go somewhere, it is safer at home. And if you're going to go out, that's fine, but be safe, like we've just all been talking about. And if there are ways to not interact with others, but get your business or errands or items done, then do that. So we are pretty well focused on that.
Thank you. Are we done with COVID-19 for tonight? I know everyone's going to be anxious to hear more on the 7 new cases. So
we will be getting information.
Already seeing lots of posts on Facebook and so forth. We will move on to public comment for items not related to COVID-19. This is for anyone to bring anything to our attention that's not otherwise on the agenda for discussion. I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I'll keep moving. There's no other new business that I'm aware of. Approval of minutes from November 6, 2019, payroll warrants and treasury warrants. Can I take those all in one motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Oh, thank you, Christy. By roll call vote, Matt Fate.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
Melissa Murphy.
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Approval of pending contracts. Are there any questions or comments on the pending contracts? Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Matt Fee.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
Melissa Murphy.
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Consent items. We have some gift acceptances. Could we have a motion on that?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Matt Fee.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
Melissa Murphy.
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. We have the one item under citizen departmental request, Sandy Petals, has been put over till probably next week. Request for approval and execution of land exchange agreement with Keep On Trucking LLC, Reese, pursuant to vote of Article 100 at the 2020 annual town meeting. Ken, did you want to walk us through this? Ken Beaugrand?
Sure. The town needs to build a new sewer pump station in addition to the existing station in Surfside. And the town has agreed to transfer 3 industrial lots on Chadbush Road in exchange for a newly created lot and an easement for easy access that the town is able to then maintain the integrity of the road and the bike path on Surfside Road. This is an ideal location, and virtually all state approvals have already been achieved. And as Dawn indicated, the exchange of lots are town-owned that are contiguous to another one owned by Miles Reese out on Shadbush Road. And it was approved by town meeting, Article 100 at the annual town meeting. We had a couple of issues with respect that were raised to make sure that there was a protection with respect to any odor that might be able to come from this. And so that the newest type of odor protection will be in there for the protection of the residents. And also there was we needed to figure out how to be able to create a stub into the sewer for Miles Reese with respect to the remaining property that he has there. Those were all negotiated by David Gray and by Weston and Sampson, the town's engineering consultants. So everyone has agreed to the format of the land exchange agreement. And so is my recommendation, as approved by town council, that the board move forward with the execution of this agreement.
Are there any questions? Thank you, Matt. Is there a second? Thank you, Christy. All those in favor by roll call. Matt Fee.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
Melissa Murphy.
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Just another note on our agenda, we are going to move our budget reports to next week. We're feeling like the agenda is a little bit too long and we do have room next week. So we'll put item 3 under town manager's report over till the 16th. Now I will move along to public hearings. We have a public hearing this evening to consider renaming Coon Street. And I know that there are a number of people wanting to speak on this. So I will open the public hearing. And shall I go right to public comments? Yes, okay. Carrie Bissiner.
Hi.
Hi. Go ahead.
I'm Carrie Bisner. My family has lived at 5 Coon Street since the early 60s. I'll be brief. If anyone has any questions as to my thinking, just let me know. My big concern, honestly, is safety. My parents a few years ago had a very severe house fire. And if the fire people had been even delayed a few minutes, the entire neighborhood could have burnt down. It was a really big deal. My parents are in their 80s. I'm very concerned about EMS and any kind of delay in response. I'm also secondarily concerned on the practical side. Like, how does the town change all the town records? Does the deed get changed? How does the post office execute this? Deliveries, getting it into GPS or maps. I don't really know how this happens. And it seems like a real big burden. As an anecdote, I will tell you, our neighbors where we live at home had to change their street name for E911. And it's been several years. It's not fully resolved. And they tell me all the time it's the worst thing that ever happened to them. So that made me very concerned about this. I think that, in some ways it feels like we're solving a perceived problem by creating a lot of very real practical problems. And I'm hoping there's a good way we can find to sort of respect the history and make it not such a big burden to have to change everything. And my parents are very attached to the history, obviously, having been there so long. So that would be my initial comments. And if anyone has any questions, let me know.
Thank you very much. This public hearing, is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak? Heidi McDonald.
Yeah, so my name's Heidi McDonald and I'm Carrie Bisner's sister. And I just want to echo a couple of the things that she said. My biggest concern is safety, not only of my parents, but others that are on that street. I also agree that, if we could find a way to respect the history and maybe educate folks, I think that's, a really good idea. And just finally, I think, all of the other things my sister talked about and the logistics of making all those changes seems a bit overwhelming. And so I'm hoping we can come up with some sort of alternative that accomplishes all of those things without having to create a lot of burdensome details for my parents to have to deal with.
Thank you, Heidi. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone else who's here to speak on this evening?
Madam Chair, would it be okay if are we allowed to speak now, just among ourselves, the board, and not close the public hearing because of Zoom and somebody might want to talk but can't figure out?
Absolutely. We can keep the public hearing and open and have board discussion.
That might be easier.
Did you want to say something?
Oh, yeah, I wanted to see if there's any other public comment, but yeah, I'm happy to speak. I've definitely I read every email that we've gotten in the packets. I think the town manager, Libby, is going to talk about the public safety aspect of it, like how much that is an issue. Definitely concerned if I was in that position. So if Libby could talk about that in a minute, or if there's anybody else that can talk about the safety issue. I understand, I wrote down things like, a very big burden and worst thing to happen to me in my life. I am no means speaking for the Black community here. No one has asked me to do that, but I have spoken to people of color and so my friends that are Black, and this is an issue for them. And they have said even with the signs aren't there, they know the street name is named that. And it, if you're white, you don't feel it, but the trauma and the negativity and the ill will beyond the words ill will that come from a word like that. If you've been called that and you've been Black growing up or anywhere through your life, that brings up, terrible things for you. So for me, I want to change it. Even if we change it to something that like what some people have said, halfway of a Captain Charles Coon, something like that, that's still going to put, some of that burden that we got from the public comment tonight, that will be difficult for those living there to change everything. But I think it's okay if we do this. I think it's important to a lot of people in our community. And I don't want even, one road sign to affect someone and have negative feelings and trauma by seeing a name of a road. And I understand the history of it. It wasn't intended there at all. That's not the intentions, but this is the reality today. So I just wanted to put my thoughts out there and hear what other board members have to say.
Matt?
Yeah, and I was leaning that way, and then until I received the letter from from Penny McDonald, and we just heard from her sisters, and some of the other people who are a bit older and talking about history, I was leaning toward changing it, but I dread changing my bank account. So so changing the street name and everything in your whole life will have to be changed. Kind of gave me pause. And I understand the meaning of the word. I understand it's not, but that isn't the intent of the word. And that's not why the word is there. And so I think, so one thought I had was Jason was talking about changing it and putting a sign there explaining why it was, that it previously was Coon Street. And I was thinking, if we changed it to another name, but I think that why not leave it and put a sign there? Leave it and explain what it means. Explain that it's, that's one possibility. And I wonder, and I understand, how people will feel, but we also, at one point, for political correctness, we discussed changing the name of the colored cemetery. And I was at the meeting where Frank Spriggs and Augie came and said, why would you do that? It's the colored cemetery. That's what we've called it, and we are not offended. Now, I understand if people are offended with this, then that gives us a reason to do that. But I'd want to make sure that we understood. And I also worry a little bit of where does this end? Are people going to be upset about other streets? What are the next ones to change? And so I just think, so I'm not, so I think that there might be a way to do, to put up something at the end of the street, call it, Captain's Coon Street if we have to change it somewhat. But I think that we should respect our history and people should learn our history. They should learn, that this is not a slight, so anyway, and that's it for now.
Now we have a number of hands raised. Mary Longacre, I'll go to you first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What Matt was saying is very close to what I was going to say, and that is, I wonder if we can change it without changing it. If we can add another part to the street sign so that when you drive by, it says something like Captain Coon Street as opposed to just Coon Street, but not change the official post office designation so that we're not triggering that avalanche of paperwork and misdirected mail and other issues. I don't know if that's a feasible option, but I wonder if it wouldn't, try and recognize both aspects of the name. Just a thought.
Thank you, Mary. I was actually somewhat thinking the same thing as what you just said. Brooke Moore.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Brooke, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My thoughts have circled around on this question a lot in the last few weeks, and my original thought was that some designation explaining the street name would be helpful, but that's really only going to be seen by people who are walking by. And my concern is that we are a tourist economy, and casual visitors who come to our island, who drive by, this ends on a very heavily trafficked street, aren't going to have the benefit of being able to read some sign. So I would favor some change. I like what Mary said. I think if it avoids some of the logistical headaches. And I think it's an important message to our community of color that we care and that we're willing to take the time and the trouble to address something that is concerning to folks who, by the way, may not feel comfortable raising their hand and speaking at a select board meeting for reasons that are also quite longstanding. So I just want to make those statements, and I think at the very least adding, even just Captain Coon Street to honor the history, and then also adding a plaque that explains the background and maybe acknowledges in some way the current meaning of the word. So that would be all I'd have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke. Rick Atherton.
Am I unmuted, Dawn?
Yes, you are. Go ahead, Rick.
I just wanted to sort of from personal recollection when I was on the board, kind of make sure people understand the comment made by Mr. Fee. I talked to Augie and Frank Spriggs a number of times about this issue of the colored cemetery. And they were quite open and concerned about losing that designation. Frankly, I was concerned with the cemetery commissioners, and I'm happy if they listen to me. They did not wish to change it, but they didn't recognize the thoughts of the senior members of our Black community on island when they made that decision. So I think Matt's comments are quite valid, and I appreciate him raising them. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Melissa Murphy.
Thanks, Dawn. It's really nice to hear from everybody. And I'm glad that it seems like the majority of us are coming to the same conclusion that there's a way to add differentiation in the street name, Captain Charles Coon Street or Captain Coon Street. Adding a historic marker is, I think, also significantly important without having to do a complete name change. And I think that addresses a lot of the concerns about the street name being misinterpreted as a racial slur, clarifies the intention and the meaning behind the name of the street, and adding a historic marker also adds context to why this family is important in Nantucket's history. So I'm really delighted to hear that many of us independently and having taken the time to read the emails and concerns. I would like to hear from Libby on the public safety comment, you know, on the, if there is any public safety issue, if we were to add something like a Captain Charles Coon Street or even Captain Coon Street, would that avoid some of the public safety concerns raised by Heidi McDonald and Carrie Bisner?
Our understanding is that, and we've spoken to the police department about this as well as the assessor's office, there really shouldn't be a public safety issue. The street name would be changed in the town's records. Captain will have to be spelled out in its entirety, can't be abbreviated. The issue of notification is going to arise with the post office primarily, and people's services like utilities, cell phone service, things like that. That is where things are going to become tricky. But as far as public safety goes, it should not be an issue locally here.
Christy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that when I first started thinking about this, I was concerned about the history of the island, but the more that I've talked to people and people of color, I really think that we need to fully change it. I think even if we go with Captain Coon, you're still leaving the work up to people to figure out what that means. Is it still a racial slur or was it a person? And you're putting that work on people of color who already, you know, have enough work and struggles. And I don't think that we should I think it's part of us facing our white fragility. We think that just tacking on Captain in front makes it okay. And I don't think that that's really going to solve the issue. I think we either go for a full name change or have Captain Charles Coon so that it's the full name spelled out. And you know, Miss Matt's comments about how many streets are we going to change, I think that that's something that we need to reflect on. If there's streets that are making our community members feel unsafe or unwelcomed, I think it's something that we should look at. I don't ever want to hear from another community member that they don't even like driving by that street and, you know, not having to, if that's their route to get to work, having to go an alternative route because they feel offended. And I don't think that we could ever understand what that feels like as an all white board. And if we could even just imagine, then I think we'd be making different decisions.
Following up on, it's Matt. How about Charles Coon Street and leave the captain off?
I think the whaling captain history is probably the very relevant to Nantucket in terms of why the street was named after him. I'm very uncomfortable changing someone's property address who doesn't want it today. I know that we have a number of people on the street who have asked for it to be changed, but we have people who've lived there for a very long time who are adamantly asking that we don't change it. And that would be a real issue for me if I was the property owner and people were making a significant change to what I knew as my property without my permission. And that's my biggest struggle here. I mean, I am happy to make a name change, but I just really would want full support of everyone who is an owner on the street, because I'm not a property owner there. And that's what I'm struggling the most with in this. So Heidi McDonald has her hand up again. Hi, Heidi. And then Brooke.
Yes, so I appreciate your comments and everyone's comments. And I think if there is a way, I can't remember who said this, but if there is a way to maybe add Captain Charles to the name, but not legally change the name, that doesn't, that wouldn't create that burden for my parents and maybe others. I think that, and I love the idea of a plaque. I think that's great. I think, Nantucket is all about history. And I think that educating folks or putting up plaques is a great idea. So if we can come to some happy medium like that accomplishes both goals, I think that would be great.
Thank you, Heidi. Brooke Moore.
There we go. It took a minute from the unmute button. I'm going to step a little farther out on a limb, emboldened by my friend Christy Ferrantella, that the inconvenience to a small number of people, to me, is increasingly feeling like an unfair balance against the real feeling of what is a very large community of color that we have on Nantucket, and whose voices were not heard back when streets were named as much. And the reference to the changing of the colored cemetery tends to have changed a lot in the intervening years between that debate and this conversation. And we're in a different place, and there's a lot of movement happening. And I think I would encourage the select board to be brave on this. Thanks.
Melissa?
I think Heidi raises a good point, but I'm not sure that there's two ways around it. If we change the street sign to read Captain Charles Coon Street, but legally the deed transfers and legal property addresses remained Coon Street, so that we didn't have issues with the post office and change of address forms and any other concerns of public safety, which I think you allayed, Libby. But is that even possible? It strikes me as not possible. But
yeah, I don't know how we would not legally change it, unless you were, and I can see that leading to some confusion. But I just had a suggestion that came into me. Could there? I mean, I don't know if anybody wants to do this. Could there be a sign next to the street sign? And by the way, currently there are no street signs. If they were reestablished, could there be a sign next to them that says named after Captain Charles Coon or something like that? I don't know. It's just a suggestion.
Kimberly Rose has her hand up. Kimberly?
Hi. So there's actually a pretty good precedent for this, and that is Nashville, Tennessee, and a lot of different towns and cities actually have memorial avenues to where the street name is not necessarily changed on paper, but on the street sign and everything, it'll have the actual name of the street, and then right underneath it says Memorial Street or whatnot. And then it gives a little bit of information about the person. So that may be a precedent that might need to be researched or thought about as a way to honor that history and also make it easier for residents. However, it still leaves the weight of that history and the weight of that word on the underrepresented history, which is racism, and still requiring that work of understanding that history whereas trying to erase those borders that have been built up over a long period of time.
Thank you very much. Mary Longacre?
Yes, 2 points. One is this started with a petition from 6 of the addresses on Coon Street requesting that the street name be changed. So I think you should give that some weight. The second is I've been through a number of address changes in just the last 5 years myself, for both me and for my parents. And it's inconvenient, absolutely. It's paperwork, absolutely. It's frustrating, but it's not the end of the world. It's something that 99% of the mail goes to the right place after you do it, and you pick up a few things that never made it. When the state changed our area code from 617 to 508, or the phone company required that we dial the area code before we dial the other 7 digits, we all just got on with it. Frustrated, inconvenient, sure, but it gets accomplished and then it's forgotten. I think giving so much weight to a minority of the street's addresses to prevent a change, and I have to support and agree with what Brooke is saying, that the change affects not just the people on the street, but also the community of color on Nantucket and visitors who come, who might be aware of it. Perhaps there aren't street signs, but there are maps that would show the name of the street. And I would have to support changing the name because of all of those reasons.
Thank you, Mary. Roberto?
I hemmed and hawed whether or not I wanted to say anything. Yeah, absolutely. There is steep tradition in the name, and the name is absolutely strong. And Captain John Coon was, we all know that there have been great men who have been named after, or whose names change throughout what history means. There's a sensitivity that I believe is necessary when we look at these sorts of things. Yes, the petition was the 6 to not change the name, but it is also an incredibly important thing to see it from the perspective of those who are offended by it. You hear the term triggered, but that term triggered is now being used as a way to attack those who were underrepresented. So when you say somebody is a bleeding heart liberal, somebody is triggered by something, triggering is a real thing. We hear it from PTSD, we hear it in shell shock and all that thing. So why do I bring that up? Is because as somebody who grew up in a very racist area where the Confederate flag was flown high in my high school, it is still an object that I respond to. I don't even buy spick and span cleaning spray. It's things like that that you really have to pay attention to. The word may be representing a person, but as people have said, times have changed. And it is unfortunate that this person's name is synonymous with a racial slur, but it is something that we have to take into consideration when it comes to sensitivity. And we declared as a town to work on our ability and to be sensitive and to listen to the minority population on this island. This is a really good memorial, even if on paper, when, the public safety side of it, when people respond, having the name be still, synonymous with how we work on it on the back end. But that front facing, that face we show everybody every day needs to be the face that we are wanting to show. And if people are offended by the term coon, it is something we should listen to. People are offended by the word Santa Maria because it was Columbus's boat. We hear this everywhere. So it is just something that I just thought we should throw in there. The decision is always yours, and I don't want to really throw anything in there, but I think it's a consideration that we should all pay attention to.
No, I appreciate the input very much.
Roberto, are you suggesting we change your name next? I'm joking.
My name is my name, and that is something I have to deal with.
I agree.
If we're going to make a wholesale name change, I would very much like us to consider the suggestion made by Frank Hartoonen, who's done the full history. And I mean, if it is truly getting rid of the entire connotation that Coon unfortunately brings up, I think that a wholesale change would be warranted rather than a halfway change. And Josephine Lane sounds like there's some very lovely history that goes along with that. And then we could do a whole plaque history about Captain Charles Coon that could be put on some sort of a little stone post or something at the end of the road if we change it. Does that make sense? Yeah, sorry. Anybody else want to comment on that? Jason?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want Heidi and Carrie and everybody who gave their thoughts about the difficulties and the uncertainty of changing a name, especially if you have elderly parents. I would feel the same way. So I don't take that lightly. I do believe a full name change is warranted here. I personally like Ruth Grant Lane, but I mean, we can always table it to whether it's going to be Josephine or Ruth Grant. I like Ruth Grant because it goes in line with somebody wrote, it was in our packets, with Lucretia Mott Lane, with Judith Chase Lane, Ruth Grant Lane. She did live there. I don't have it in front of me, the history. So it connects to the history of that street. And I like your idea, what you said, Don, about keeping that history there with a plaque or some kind of memorial there on the original history and the original name, what it's connected to. But I think I don't want to go halfway, put the residents there through all those burdens and kind of keep the name. I'd rather go, if we're going to do it, we need to go all the way. And with everything that's happened on this island in the last 2 or 3 years, I believe this is the least that we can do and take it seriously for those in our Black community that, you know, as Roberto said, this is a trigger. And I think it's the right thing to do.
Christy, go ahead.
I was just going to add that I like the Ruth Grant Lane over Josephine Lane. And I think that we should go with a full name change, as I mentioned earlier. I'm okay with putting some sort of plaque or stone that recognizes Captain Coon, but I don't think that it should be part of the name or part of a memorial drive or anything like that.
Could we offer some assistance, maybe through Taylor Hiltz, to help with the necessary paperwork that people need to do to make this change happen? If we do a change, I'd like a little bit, if we are going to do the full name change, which is what it sounds like maybe where the board is heading, I'd love a little bit more input on which name. You know, none of these names were the ones that the residents originally suggested. That one's already in use. Melissa, and then Eric.
Oh, I was just going to ask Don if we could continue the public hearing once we, you know, offer some different names, and we've shown the community that we have a commitment to the name, a full sale name change, and get some further feedback on it so that we're not, I think it's an important change to make, but I don't think we have to rush into it. And by continuing the hearing a week or two, I think it allows for some more feedback.
I agree. I would very much like more feedback, and I believe we could just leave the public hearing open. Erica?
I was just going to note that in Fran Kartunen's history, Ruth Grant actually owned a home on Coon Street. Josephine Hall was a visitor. So I don't know if that carries any more weight that you actually would be naming it after somebody who owned a home on the street.
Yes, Josephine went to Ruth Grant's home. I was just going off of what Fran offered as a potential name. But I would definitely love to hear more input from people.
Oh, I'm also already getting some text messages from folks who are saying that they would gladly volunteer to help if people actually need help with name changes. I'm sure it's a nuisance, but you know, I hate to put something else on Taylor's list, but I'm sure if community members need help, they know how to reach out to us and ask for it.
So, Madam Chair, do you need a motion, or can we just agree to table it with a direction?
I think we need a motion to continue the public hearing. I'm thinking, why don't we continue the public hearing till October 7th? Erica?
I'll make that motion. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say you have to do the motion to date certain.
Yeah. Melissa, till October 7th. Is there a second?
Yes. Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Matt Fee,
Aye.
Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
aye,
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
And so between now and October 7th, I really hope that people will write in their thoughts, tell us their thoughts. I know not everyone's comfortable raising their hand at this meeting, but please reach out to select board members that you feel comfortable reaching out to and give your input. Rick Atherton, did you have a follow-up comment on this issue? Your hand's raised.
Am I unmuted now?
I can hear you, Rick.
Great, thank you. Just sort of a point of, I guess, inquiry. I remember receiving, I think the right phrase might be, the admonition of town council when members of the board received emails or text messages specifically to them, which were not shared with the whole board during the course of a meeting. So I think you might want to review that at some point, Dawn, and make clear to all of us how that process is supposed to work. Thank you.
Rick, you are correct. Melissa, you made a little bit of an error. You actually...
No, I'm happy to say my friend Marita Scarlett, who's a member of Nantucket Equity Advocates, says that she was sure she could help find volunteers if people were needing assistance. So thank you, Rick, for the reminder.
Thank you. We do have to identify. I think that wraps up the public hearing for tonight. We'll continue this on October 7th. Town manager's report, update regarding MassWorks 2020 infrastructure grant application for Waite Drive improvements.
We are going to get a brief summary from Tucker Holland on this.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. So this is just to inform you all that on August 28th, there was a real team effort between the Beta Engineering Group, Rob McNeil, Andrew Vorse, Hawkeen Management, and myself, I guess you'd say, to submit a grant request through the MassWorks infrastructure program. We ended up seeking $2.4 million toward the $3 million estimated construction cost for Waite Drive. The board may recall that at the annual town meeting in 2019, monies were appropriated toward this purpose, and therefore the 80% that we are seeking through MassWorks, if we were to receive it, we have already allocated the remaining 20% in order to complete the project. I guess I would just say While there is no guarantee of receiving an award, the Wait Drive infrastructure project, which will serve the planned housing at Six Fairgrounds or Tacoma Green, in addition to other affordable housing along the roadway, Beta believes to be a well-suited candidate for an award. The fact that Nantucket is a housing choice community, that the planned infrastructure project serves affordable housing, that the municipality is contributing 20% of the cost, that the town is prepared to move forward on the project upon award receipt, that Nantucket has not received a MassWorks award in quite some time, and that permits are in hand, all are expected to be viewed favorably and score points in the review process. Having said all that, it should be noted that this is a highly competitive program, and I'll just mention that awards are expected to be made by the end of October.
Thank you, Tucker. Do we need any action on this?
Nope, it was just an update.
Okay. Matt?
Yeah, I'm happy to see the connecting roads included on the, the plan we saw. I hope they're planning that. We aren't going to get control of traffic in Old South and other areas until we adopt an urban grid from sort of Mid-Island out to the airport. All those streets need to connect. There need to be multiple ways for people to navigate through there and not just a couple feeder roads, a couple connector roads. So I was happy to see that we're going to start that process. It was well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next on the town manager's report, we've got a presentation regarding the third sewer force main project. I don't know if David wants to give any other introductory comments, but as the board will recall, we had a sewer main failure on January 4th, 2018, resulting from a very severe winter storm. And at the end of that and during that, it was determined that we really need a third force main to serve from C Street Pump Station to Surfside sewer treatment facility. And we've engaged EPG Environmental Partners and Hazen and Sawyer to look at all of this for us. An alternatives analysis of the route has been done. And I don't see them on, but I did invite the chair of the Historical Commission and the Planning Board and the HTC to hear this. So maybe they're watching. But there are some issues for the board to think about. I know that people will probably be asking about whether or not some of the wires can be put underground. That was a big issue a couple of years ago. So Ziad will take us through that. And we do need the board to hopefully make a decision tonight as to the route so that we can get going on design and permitting, which all of that's going to take a while for the project. We appropriated $32 million at the 2020 annual town meeting for this project. And we need to keep on track with it due to the funding, which is coming from the state revolving loan fund. Anything else introductory, David, or even Brian or Frank or Ziad, that you would want to mention?
Hi, Libby. Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone on the board, for having us tonight. Frank Ayotte from Hazen and Sawyer is with us, as well as Ziad Gary from EPG. We have spent a lot of time on this plan and the route discussions, and we've walked the route many a times, backwards, forwards, sideways, to take and come up with our best decisions based on elevations, hydraulics, the ability to not disrupt a lot of in-town major routes or traffic. So, and all the other routes that we have chosen for this route for, we already have plans to replace sewer, water, and working on storm drains as well. So I'm going to turn this over to Frank Ayotte to start. He'll do the first section, and then Ziad will come in afterwards.
Yeah. Thank you, David. On behalf of Hazen and Sawyer, I'd like to thank members of the Select Board and all the town officials for inviting us to present tonight. My name is Frank Ayotte. I'm the owner's project representative for the project. And next slide, please. We've broken up today's agenda to go over a little bit of the project background, our tasks completed to date. Ziad will walk us through from Environmental Partners Group, the alternatives analysis report, which is currently in our QA/QC right now. We've essentially recommended a preferred route that we're going to discuss this evening. We're going to talk a little bit about the tasks that are in progress, the basis of design report moving forward, archaeology, and a lot of the field work that has to take place in the upcoming months, later in September and October, once we have an approved route. Next slide, please. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on the project background. This project actually, the planning of this project actually began in 2016, where we were actually doing the design of the rehabilitation of the C Street pump station. It's certainly the need, it got accelerated, excuse me, when one of those force mains ruptured in the winter of 2018. Since then, we're looking to construct the third force main as a primary force main, which will provide additional sewer capacity per the sewer master plan. This will allow us to retire the existing 16-inch polyethylene force main, which experienced the rupture, and reduce reliance on the 20-inch ductile iron force main, which is in need of rehab. Next slide. Now we're going to turn the project over to, the presentation over to Ziad, who's going to talk a little bit about the alternatives that we jointly walked together and describe the recommendations for the preferred force main.
Thank you, Frank, David, Libby. Again, good to see you again. This is Ziad Carey with Environmental Partners Group. I was involved, much of what was said here, I was involved in 2018 with the assessment of the force main rupture, the 16-inch force main. And even at the time, while we were doing the assessment and the repairs, we also looked at these alternatives in a sense, just in case something were to happen to this 20-inch force main that's currently active. And we worked closely with the DPW and the sewer department and the consultant for the town, Hazen and Sawyer, Weston Sampson at the time, on looking into different options and different routes. So this is really nothing new to us, but I'd like to walk you through today how we arrived to this alignment and what's involved in the selection process of this route. So, here we have two fixed points, of course. We have the C Street pump station that pumps majority of the sewer system, pumps it from downtown to the wastewater treatment plant. And, the 16-inch today runs on the opposite side of town. They all merge together by Hooper Farm Road and then out to South Shore to the treatment plant. The 16 obviously was determined not to be relied upon for obvious reasons. It's exceeded its shelf life, if you will. There was some issues with the joints, a lot of unknowns with the force main. And then, of course, the 20-inch today had, it's been in business for 35 years. Shelf life usually is about 35 to 50 years. It has some suspect locations with excessive velocities and scour velocities, especially going from high points to low points. So that's what created the need for this new force main. We, as David and Frank had mentioned, we walked these sites multiple times. We looked at them on paper. What goes into the decision-making for the alternative analyses and the alignment, basically the four main components. We look at the length of the force main. You want to keep it reasonably short enough to get from point A to point B. You look at constructability. Can it be constructible? And what is that going to involve? There's also the concept of, can you take advantage of existing town utilities that are candidate for replacement along that particular alignment? And how can you maximize the effort? Because instead of digging once or twice or three times, you just do it all at once. And then, of course, the last thing is the cost, because cost plays a big role in any decision making in any plan or any project of that magnitude. Again, this is about 18,300 feet, slightly less. It's about 3.5 miles. You have Surfside and South Shore Road that kind of occupies a little over 2 miles, and then you have 1 mile from the C Street pump station until you get out of the downtown. The picture on the bottom left corner, this is where the station, the C Street pump station. So we're going to come out of the station there, and then we're going to take a left, so into the computer screen, if you will. The 16 goes on the opposite side. Next slide, please. I can't really see so basically we looked at 2 major routes, and really there are 2 routes, but then each route had a variation, like a small combination. In other words, the common routes, we come out of the C Street pump station, and then we go up C Street, Step Lane, Center, Lily Street, Liberty, and then from there on, those are the common denominator, if you will. And then by the time you get outside of town, before you get to the wastewater treatment plant, you have South Shore Road, and then you have Surfside. The only major difference is the substitution for Surfside would be the Hooper Farm lane. And then we also looked at Pleasant versus Pine. And then the issue with Pleasant was that you have we thought about using the bike path there, but then you have the hospital and the traffic that's involved along the route. Not to mention with Pleasant, you have a higher grade line. So in other words, the force main would be about 20 feet higher than it would be using Pine. So without having to list every street on this alignment, we highlighted option 2A, and I could walk through option 2A. I could read it here on my screen because easier to read. So option 2A basically has about 226 feet.
We lost your vocal, Ziad.
Oh, sorry. Let me just bring it up here. Sorry about that. So C Street has about 226 linear feet. We go up the Step Lane about 300 feet. Take a right onto Center, 400 feet. 1,200 linear feet on Lily. And then 800 on Liberty. Winter Street about 300 feet. Then we go on to Pine about 713 feet. And then from there on, the short distance on Silver, 216, Pleasant Street, about 360, Atlantic, about 885, and then a little over a mile on Surfside, and then another mile on South Shore Road. So this was the route that we selected, and then we recommended in the alternative analyses report that we presented to the town. Next slide, please. Part of the decision making also, we looked at these options. We're trying to quantify them by, why are they considered and why we didn't consider them. So obviously option 2A, which is not on this table. So we looked at 1A. Usually 1A, we said it's a little bit longer, and option 1B was the longest one. It probably adds about 2,000 linear feet to the alignment. And if you do a simple math, let's say an average of $1,500 per linear foot, that adds about $3 million to the project. Option 2B was slightly less than 1A, but 2A was obviously the shortest one by a couple hundred, 300 linear feet. These options have higher disruption to residential areas, a little bit more than 2A, and we focused on Pine Street because the thought process was in that area there, we were told about 75% of the local residents, 75% of the residents are seasonal residents. So we thought we could perhaps use that to the advantage instead of going to Pleasant or anywhere else for that matter. We looked also, 1A had a higher peak elevation, which is 60 feet or 61 feet from water level. And then the one that we selected had 40 feet, so that's 20 feet less than hydraulic grade line, which makes a big difference on the operation of the pump station today. And then, of course, on the future operation of the force main in terms of scour velocities and in terms of function and maintenance. We also looked at the archaeology, and we'll get into that a little bit more in detail. Obviously, any route that we choose from point A to point B has some impact on archaeology, but we also selected the one that has the least impact. Sparks Avenue and Surfside, we looked at Hooper Farm Lane and then Sparks Ave and Surfside. So we understand there are two projects that the town is undertaking for the next several years, and the idea, aside from the fact that that alignment would be 2,000 linear feet longer than the other two, or the other options, because of the coordination and shutdown of the local roadway and having to shut the road down for an extended amount of time, maybe 2 to 3 years. Next slide, please. So this is the preferred route tabulated here on the right-hand side. It's about, again, 18,200 feet, 3.5 miles. Again, in summary, it is the shortest of the ones that we selected. It has no impact on the 100-foot buffer, wetland buffer. And we also looked at the potential use of the bike path on the side on South Shore Road to minimize impact on construction and then restoration cost. Again, we discussed the peak elevation between this preferred route versus the others. It's definitely flatter, and that's what we want in the operation of the force main. And then lastly is the Pine Street discussion that we talked about in terms of the seasonal residents on that street there. On the challenges, of course, anything that we do, as we discussed before, it's going to be challenging. No construction is going to be easy, especially when you have a tight right-of-way, when you about 1.5 miles to 2 miles within the downtown. Regardless what route you're going to take, you're going to create some sort of a disruption. But then again, in our opinion, we thought this is the one that's going to give us the least headaches along the way. And then we talked about the construction within the historic district, slightly a little over 1 mile. And then we have some challenges with the traffic and coordination issues, and that's going to be the case regardless where we go. And we have some construction within the commercial areas. It's about 2,400 linear feet. But then certainly we could sequence it such that construction can take place in the not in the winter, obviously, not in the summer, of course. We could do it in the winter, weather permitting, and then just not to disrupt the commercial zone there. Next slide, please. This is just a visual where, some photos that we took along the alignment. It's just, it's C Street, what it looks like there today. A majority of this alignment, obviously here, we talk about way on C Street. We are considering, we'll get into that a little bit in more detail. But from C Street, because outside the station, there's a lot of pipes, utility pipes, water, sewer, force mains, drains. So the thought process would be doing this trenchless technology between the C Street pump station and the top of the hill before we get into center. No excavation. We'd be digging a pit outside the station and a receiving pit up top, maybe a relief pit in between, and then shoot the line across to the top of the hill. To the right, this is what Step Lane and North Water Street looks like, Center Street. Lily, you could see it's pretty tight at the beginning there, but it kind of widens up a little bit at the end, and then that's a perfect candidate for utility replacement. The water needs to be replaced. Certainly the drains and the stormwater system needs to be upgraded along the way there, and so is the gravity sewer. You could see, I'm sure a lot of people do park on these sidewalks. The curbs don't really have much reveal. So the thought process is we're going to utilize the sidewalks to host one of these utilities and perhaps rebuild them with some with the same treatment, same restoration process, curbing, and with some reveal on it. Next slide, please. Again, this is along the rest of the road right before we get into Surfside. And next one, please. So we worked with both the water and the sewer department along with the OPM on this. This is a summary of what along this particular route, anything that's shaded that was a candidate to be replaced anyway. So the thought process is we take advantage of the situation and we replace age 6-inch VC sewer. This is from the CMOM reports. A lot of GIS data that were presented to us on the from the database. A lot of VC pipe, old pipe, cast iron pipe on the water side, also that needed to be replaced. And we thought it was a good candidate to take advantage of the situation and then replace them so we would do the digging once. Next slide, please. Along the same lines, the working with the highway department. So what you see here on the right side, just those are tiles from the GIS database. The drainage work, we work in also independently with Rob McNeil on some upgrades of the stormwater watershed. And then anything that we come across within those alignments along those routes, if you hit a drain line, you replace it. If a structure is functioning and it just needs to be cleaning, there will be some coordination with the highway department to make those happen and make them functional. And then again, of course, if there's an old pipe in the way that would happen to be within the limit of excavation, that would be replaced with a more modern pipe. If it's a VC pipe, maybe we'll up it up to either RCP pipe or perhaps ADS pipe. And next slide, please. So once we have the alternative analyses report now that's currently under QA/QC by the town and the OPM, the next phase of our scope would be the basis of design report. And what the basis of design report basically, you pin down the alignment, you know which route you're going to select, and then therefore you start with the hydraulics, and from the hydraulics you look into the pipe size, pipe material, hydraulic profiling, the elevations, force main components, air release valves, blow off, isolation valves. In case there's a break, you don't want the repeat of 2016. You want to add more valves along the alignment to be able to isolate this flow and then minimize the amount of leaking from the pipe into the sensitive resources. And then with that, we have to discuss also that you have a 20-inch force main. The intent of this 20-inch is to continue to operate as a standby force main. Once this pipe is designed, installed, and tested and operational, the thought process would be to make this the primary pipe. And therefore, the existing 20 pipe would serve as a backup. With what David had said early on, that the 16 would have to be retired and perhaps put to use in a different capacity, perhaps a carrier for a cable of some sort. But again, one of the other thoughts that we had too, the 20-inch that currently is in service today and this new force main have to be within a general vicinity to one another. They have components that were discussed early on, the pump station on Surfside Road, the Warren's Landing proposed pump station. Those would have to come into these force mains, and if it comes into the 20, it has to also come into the new force main. And that's why it is pretty important and critical to keep them within a general vicinity to one another. What you see here on the bottom picture, this is a force main situation that happened in Plymouth. Again, they had similar ruptures. They only had one force main, and we ended up replacing that force main that ruptured, and a new force main was installed parallel to it, and they were cross-connected for easy access, for maintenance, for operational consistency. Also, keep in mind, if you have a force main today that is not in service, you want to prevent the deposition of solids. If you use it once and you have to either drain it, clean it, or maybe exercise it once in a while, so that way the solids don't harden up in that force main, and then the function of that force main becomes obsolete. So again, it's pretty critical to cross-connect them. Because they're going to accept the independent pump station. What pumps into one has to pump into the other one. Next slide, please. again, this is an illustration with what's shown out here today in yellow. That is the existing 16 that will no longer be in service once the new force main is operational. You could see what's presented in red is the 20-inch ductile iron pipe, and that is it has the Surfside pump station that pumps into it, and of course Warren's Landing proposed pump station would have to be pumped into it as well. And we have a couple ideas where these force mains do cross connect or should cross connect. And the thought process of using Surfside and South Shore Road, of course, because you have wider right of way, and then you could make those connections feasible. Next slide, please. This is what I briefly touched on early on, the trenchless technology. And again, this is a consideration for C Street going up the hill. And it's not just simply limited to that. We'll work with both the town and the OPM with the whole team to determine what would be a good candidate to one, expedite the construction process, two, minimize disruption, and then three, make the restoration, limit the type of restoration or the cost restoration, if you will. So again, this is a consideration. We will consider any segment of this force main that would be a good candidate for trenchless technology will be under consideration. Next slide, please. Archaeology, we retained, again, this is too early in the process. We did retain the public archaeology laboratories to do a desk study assessment. They've been working on Nantucket. They know the area extremely well. Like I mentioned early on, any area that you start digging into, there's some impact. But anything that you see here on the red, big, large red area there between this across from the school and Surfside, that is the area that has the highest impact. But if you look within the downtown, if you follow the blue line that we're proposing, of course that gets away from the purple dots, so it really has the minimal impact on archaeology. Next slide, please. From a scheduling perspective, today before COVID-19 happened, we were on target to finalize the design by July of 2019. Of course, that is no longer feasible. Today, we finished the first task, which is the alternative analyses, and we're here today to get this route blessed by all of you here to make sure that we're once we have that route selected and agreed upon, we're going to move on to do the field portion of the work. So along this alignment, we're looking to, we have between 20 and 30 days of geotechnical borings, determine the soil profiles, the environmental impacts, groundwater on the construction, put some monitoring wells and see the, especially in the downtown area, whether the water would be tidally influenced or not, and what type of dewatering techniques the contractor would have to employ to make this feasible. Again, along the alignment, we're doing geoprobing to see the soil profile, anything that's unsuitable to make sure we capture it beforehand. There's also survey, and the survey has to extend from the C Street pump station all the way up to the wastewater treatment plant, property line survey, and instrument survey along the whole alignment. And if we need to do easement takings, this is the time to look at them. And of course, before we get into winter, the thought process is we really want to get the survey piece done in September, and once September is done, we could probably do the geotechnical borings. And again, the thought process would be to finish the design by the end of the year, maybe January, and that would give us 2 months for the DEP process to review, to give us permission to award, permission to advertise, permission to award, and then have a contractor on board by June 30th, 2021. And this is a critical date because June 2021 is when the SRF funding, this is what the deadline you have to have the contractor on board and sign before that date for the loan to be active. Next slide, please. So action items today, we're looking for the approval on the on this preferred force main alignment. And as discussed, June 2021 is the funding eligibility for the SRF program. And we need to, once we have the route selected and agreed upon, we definitely need to work with the basis of the design report and get into the details on the hydraulics and the pipe selection and the sizing and all of that. And then of course the constructability of this force main and pin down the cost for sure. And that's why we're asking here to get the survey. We have a surveyor that's ready to go, and we really hate to lose them for the season. Now everybody is going to be busy in September, October before the winter comes in. And then of course the geotechnical exploration, they could be done independently. We're hoping to get on board by September 27th. I know the island wants to, I know Columbus Day weekend is a big thing, so perhaps we could allow him to start on South Shore Road and kind of work backwards out of the downtown. And then we're hoping to finalize with that schedule. We'll probably be on target to finalize the design by February 2021. And again, that will give us the buffer to go through the DEP process of review and permission to advertise an award, and then have a little bit of a float here about a month, just in case we run into problems, so we don't lose that target, which is June 2021. Next slide, please. So other considerations, I was involved, the board with back with the LA project over a year ago, and there was a big ticket item on why can't the utilities be underground. And of course here we, we looked at, we have to consider this for sure. So this, this route that we selected, well, first off, we don't really know if the National Grid has a feeder within the general vicinity of this alignment. Second, the planning process with National Grid and the other utilities, Verizon and Comcast, we all know it's overwhelming, and then they could extend about 2 to 3 years. And then, of course, what we found out in the LA project, the key here is even if we were able to put anything underground, that really doesn't eliminate the need to get rid of the poles along the alignment. And then, of course, you get the services that we'll talk about, the transformers and then the large vaults that would be required. And with the large vaults and the alignment that we selected with the, left turn, right turn would make the installation of the underground utilities along with the town utilities almost impractical. And of course, we have, in addition to N-Grid, there's the Verizon and Comcast that would have to be brought on board with that too. And then the schedule impact, just because it may take them 2 or 3 years of planning. And again, the need for this project that really has to happen before the June 2021, that puts a little bit of a pressure on us for this one. Next slide, please. Just what we talked about and what we saw during the LA project. Again, it can be used as a express feeder, similar to LA, similar to what N-Grid proposed on the underground piece. If you do that, you still need the transformers. Every couple, 3 houses would need a transformer, and we showed this on the top left-hand corner there with the transformer and the bollards. There's also the, on the next slide, if you would, because of what we saw in the 2018 when the force main ruptured, the amount of dewatering that's involved, the stacking of utilities, because they had their duct bank over and above every single town-owned utility, whether it's water, sewer, drain, or force main for that matter. Everything had to be supported to be able to access all the utilities underneath the duct banks and their cabling. And on the next slide, we talked about the vaults that National Grid needed to, if we were to put this underground, these vaults are 14 feet by 11 feet. And if you're working within a 14-foot right-of-way, that would make almost the installation of any water, sewer, or force main would have to be extremely deep, and that would add tremendous amount of cost and impact on the construction for the town. And my impression is that my understanding is National Grid, even if it's feasible, I wasn't sure if National Grid was able to kick in any of the costs associated with the upgrades. Aside from, I guess, the alignment that we selected with the turns on the left side, right side, you cannot do it without a vault. And then with the vault, with a 14-foot wide vault, it's almost impractical or almost impossible to put the utilities in those roadways. Next slide. That's all I have. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Board members, questions? Public questions, Matt?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, and now we are sizing this to carry enough for how many years? Does this take care of us for good, and what are the projections on, future?
So I know Frank will have to also answer some of it, but let me start with that. So the 20-inch today is basically carrying the load. And I know the town is being proactive about I&I issues, addressing their infiltration and inflow issues, and being proactive with that. So keep in mind, the pump station is today, the pumps work with this 20-inch, and they also work with the 60, and I'm sure they could work with the 16 and the 20. The size of the force main hasn't been determined. At a minimum will be 20, but most likely would be 24. We'll have to determine that, but I think that force main will be handling all the flow from the station.
Right. And I would recommend we go as large as we need to go, and don't everything we do within 10 or 15 years, it's not big enough. Because of the growth we have here, I think we should be, the expense is the work. It's the pipe is the pipe. So, I'm glad to hear it's going to be large.
Anybody else have questions? We do need an action. Melissa?
I didn't have any questions, maybe just a couple of comments. I thought your analysis of the different routes was really well done, and I appreciated the thoroughness of that. So thank you very much. And I agree with your recommendation and all the thought and consideration that went into those. So thank you. If everything gets approved by June 2021, would work then start in July? Because that seemed a little concerning to me that we were going to be ripping up roads during our biggest, season. But thank you for everything. It's a very clear presentation.
Sure, thank you. But yeah, definitely this type of project, I think we see this going 1.5 to 2 years for construction, and certainly we need to sequence it. There's a major disruption, especially when you're dealing with a 20 or 24-inch, 6 or 7 feet deep, working within tight right-of-ways. But I think the sequence here would be such that work in the summer could take place on South Shore Road and some isolated areas where nothing is impacted, but then definitely the downtown would have to be in the winter.
Thank you for answering that. We have a couple of public questions. Burton Balkind.
Okay, can you hear me, Dawn?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to address Matt, Select Board Member Matt Fee's concern about the capacity of the line in the future. I think, and in these kind of projects, the island needs a carrying capacity study to understand what we're building to, what we can maximally build for, and how we're going to achieve that. I thought it was a great presentation to her, and as a citizen and a taxpayer, I appreciate all the options that you guys have presented. But I really feel like we're almost, looking through like a fog if we don't know where the island's maximum capacity to carry and how we're going to achieve that. So I just wanted to bring up those points. I appreciate this opportunity to talk. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I can touch a little bit on that, and thank you, Brett, for your question. The force main design is a little different than gravity sewers. In gravity sewers, you kind of tend to build larger and bigger mains, where in force main design, you want to take and have the pipe have the ability to have scouring so it doesn't have any buildups. You can't make them very large because then you'll have the potential for having H2S gases built up. You won't have the scour power that you need to have to keep all the solids moving. So there's a very deep science that goes into designing of a force main, which is quite a bit different than a gravity line. And either Ziad or Frank can kind of jump in a little bit more on that. But we can only build it as big as what we can estimate the flows will be without jeopardizing the construction.
Yeah, and to answer your question earlier, a sewer master plan was completed in April of this year for the entire island. So we do have projections that are essentially a build out well into the future on what we expect for this pump station to handle adequately. So that has been completed, to answer the gentleman's question.
Thank you, Frank. Mary Longacre, did you have a question or a comment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'm not sure who's the right person to answer this, but I heard the potential for work on the storm drains. If I remember correctly, one of the issues with the C Street pump station failure in the storm a couple years ago was that flooding exacerbated the problem. And if somebody can address whether or not sea level rise or additional flooding frequency and magnitude has been factored into the plans so far, and if they will be factored in as well in the future. I realize that most of this project does not take place at the coast, but it does start at the C Street pumping station. So I'm just curious whether sea level rise has been considered or would be considered to have an impact. Thank you.
Yeah, I can answer that question. Yeah. The C Street pump station itself, we performed the renovation of that, the rehabilitation of that, and that was completed a few years ago. And that took into account the latest sea level, the latest FEMA maps, and resiliency was built into that station. The pipe itself will be completely underground, so we'll have no issues with essentially any of the flooding aspects of that. But the station itself is built for flood protection. I think it's up to 4 feet above finished grade surface, so up to elevation 9. So if you go to C Street right now, it's a ground surface around elevation 5, 5 feet above sea level rise. So to answer your question, the station is built for resiliency, and the pipeline itself will be underground. And then we try to route this pipeline as quickly as possible out of town, so we're not going through any of the low-level areas of town. If you recall, the 16-inch polyethylene force main hugged almost the shoreline there on South Water Street. So we're going in the opposite direction, up the hill, past across North Water Street, up the hill, and out of town as quickly as possible. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Rick Atherton.
Dawn, thank you. I hope I have this right. I heard a reference to a master plan that seemed to me to be related to sort of sewer capacity and the future build out of population on the island. And is that plan available on the town website so that we can all understand the projections that are involved in sizing and making the right recommendations on the sewer pipeline?
Yes, Rick, thank you very much for that question. The sewer master plan is in fact on the sewer department's website. It was just completed in the last 6 months by Weston and Sampson. And it goes into all the details. We worked with planning for many, many hours to pick. We went through every single lot. It wasn't just by area. We went lot by lot by lot across the whole island for the potential for build out of all properties.
And I'll note too that you came to the select board and presented it.
Yes, I don't know exactly when now, but it was also presented there. And I know I've spoken a couple of times at some of the neighborhood associations recently. They had questions on it, and it's so it is on the website.
Oh, Rick, your hand's still up. Did you have a follow-up? Okay.
John, Dawn, I do. Sorry about that. I appreciate the comments and the plans available, but it sounds to me, at least as a novice here, that the plan involves a significant degree of long-term planning of build out and sustainability of the sort of density of the island as a whole. And I think we all ought to find a way for you to share that information with us. Is it 20,000 lots, 35,000 lots? What is involved in the process that went into developing the master plan? Thank you.
If everyone wants me to stay here all night, I can and discuss all of that. But I could I could get Rick more information on that, and we can actually have the consultant answer some more of those questions at another time if you'd like. But we do have that data.
Thank you, David. I think we'll need a follow-up on all of the assumptions that went into that analysis. It's quite extensive. Are there any other questions? We do need to take an action to adopt the preferred force main alignment. Unless anybody wants to discuss any further.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Jason. All those in favor by roll call: Matt Fay.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
Melissa Murphy.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Sorry. Yeah, one quick comment. I understand the difficulty of burying poles, and maybe we asked the question the wrong way, or maybe our parents were just really smart, 30 years ago when we did bury poles in the downtown. But I think maybe at some point the question we should be asking ourselves is, how do we do it? Not how can, not what are all the reasons why it can't be done, but how do we do it and how do we phase it? And maybe it's an aspirational goal for 50 years from now. But, I think every time we talk about it, well, Comcast this and National Grid that, and Verizon's hard to work with. At some point, if we want to sort of get our sidewalks back and sort of improve our historic core, how are we going to do it? And it's not, we don't have to answer it tonight, but I'm just trying to pose the question differently. So maybe we get a different answer someday.
Libby?
I just want to point out that at the 2020 annual town meeting, we did have a $500,000 capital item associated with an island-wide underground wiring feasibility study, which, as you know, we had to push out. So this will be on a list of items for the board to reconsider putting back in the fiscal 22 plan.
Yep, I think things have been a little delayed with COVID.
Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, David. Really appreciate it. Ziad, Frank.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
DPW. for Washington and Francis and Union.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Rest of the select board. Back again to discuss the Washington and Francis improvement concepts. As a little bit of a background, as most of the board will remember, 2018, 2019 land takings and the grant swap with Land Bank and the NISDA property was taken. That was implemented to allow for this intersection improvement along the primary truck route at Washington and Francis, similar to previous improvements at Francis at Union Street. The project involves not just surface changes, but subsurface utility upgrades, and then obviously sidewalk and roadway improvements. And it is also an important bike connection to the in-town bike path recently constructed at Consu Springs at the end of Washington Street Extension. After several rounds of comments with MPEDC, the BPAC, select board comments, as well as traffic safety work group, the preferred alternative concept is presented here tonight for board consideration and endorsement. This concept is known as Alternative D. If anyone is interested in looking backwards to the previous presented concepts, I believe Erica does have those, and we do have the ability to pull those back up. I would like to focus on what we're trying to achieve here. And you probably have noticed we have implemented this past summer the additional sharrows along Washington Street into Washington Street Extension, as well as a very vibrant and improved thermoplastic application along the crosswalk to really delineate the bike route to really help. And I think the feedback I've heard and the witness of what's been going on down there on many occasions this past summer indicates to me that this concept is already working specifically for the bike routes. And that's fantastic news. From driving to other modes by 6%. I'm not sure if it was just me, but there was seemingly a really big shift to bikes this past summer. I'm glad to see it, and I'm glad to be a part of improving any kind of bike infrastructure that's going to continue that trend. So with that, I'm happy to try to quickly highlight this final document. Basically, it's a final concept which would allow us, with the board's approval, to move towards construction documents and final design. So we're talking about a 12-foot wide slip lane coming out of town along the truck route with a flush Belgian block separator island next to a 10-foot turning lane in from Washington Street Extension. Those are the two moving out of town lanes. 5.5-foot sidewalks, and then a 10-foot inbound lane. The stop line at the end of Francis Street at Washington will be in the same location that it currently is. And the same on Washington Street Extension coming out of that. The stop line remains at the same location. You'll notice a red area that's highlighted along Washington Street Extension on the south side. That is a planned future sidewalk extension, but will require some further negotiations and easement or taking from the neighbor. With that has been or had been previously discussed with the planning director, but has not come full circle. It is not something that is absolutely necessary to move forward with this project. but something that we would endeavor to include in the future. On the lower section, we are looking to basically improve at the at the Francis Street, Union Street intersection, simply mirroring the same treatment of the proposed Belgian block flush to allow the trucks to be able to pass over that area as they need to, but to better channelize the passenger vehicles to stay in their lane and to keep that area as safe as possible, because there is quite a lengthy crossing. That crossing, as well as the crossing at Washington and Francis, would be similar to what's been implemented with the sidewalk improvements downtown. Be flush granite with brick center sections. And that's pretty much it.
Oh, Jason?
I just want to give the select board a little background on how much we've looked at this as different entities. So Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, BPAC, looked at it at least 3 times over the last year and a half. Traffic Safety's looked at it, I think, at least 2 times that I know of. And so we've looked at the public safety aspect, but I didn't really get the full sense of it until I went down there with Rob and we looked at it, for almost an hour and watched traffic and thought about bikes and pedestrians. And then I went down again with Rob and Art Gasparo and really looked at it again from different angles. And it's one of those intersections that you really need to be there to look at and think through it. It's complicated. And I think we've come a long way in this last year and a half to really, it's definitely going to help the trucks, the big trucks that go through there. But how do we make it safe for people to ride their bikes and to walk there? And I think we've accomplished the best version of all of those modes. So I just wanted the select board to know that.
Melissa?
Thank you. Don, through you, Jason, does BPAC support this option? I know there were some concerns of some of the other options at the last meeting.
We haven't met on this particular option because of COVID. We haven't really met since, I think, February. But I would think that, I can't speak for everybody, but because we looked at it so much, I think we really addressed all of those concerns. BPAC just looks at it, yeah, we love cars, but we look at it just from the bicycle and pedestrian perspective. And I think it's much safer than that first version that came out 2 years ago. And then, some of the other options that came out last year.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
I was giving you the thumbs up.
Yeah, I agree. I think the changes that, that Rob made and they've made on this were to address some of the concerns that BPAC had. And I think of all the choices we had, this was the sort of the preferred one at the time. So.
Christy?
And I'll just echo what everyone's saying, that I think it's come a long way and I like where it's going, and it's definitely more pedestrian and biker friendly than we saw previously. So thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate the crosswalk improvements and all of the thought that's gone into this. Melissa?
Thank you, Don. I was just going to agree. I think that this final plan makes walking, biking, and driving into and out of town safer for everybody, and just improves not just the visitor experience of safely accessing town, but also for our kids who ride their bikes to work or just go into town to do an activity. So I think this is a really great improvement and really sorely needed. So thank you for your time and finessing all of those options.
Thank you.
I'm assuming you'd like a motion for the board to endorse this plan?
Yes, please, Madam Chair.
So moved.
Is there thank you, Christy. All those in favor by roll call: Matt Fee.
Aye.
Christy Parentella.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Melissa Murphy.
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So from here, we will be moving forward with the engineering for the final design and construction plans. which will be expected to be included in the next town meeting warrant article for a particular. I look forward to working with the board on that. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it. The next item I'll probably introduce for you, Libby, if you want me to. This is a request for the town for an exemption and a disclosure for an appearance of a conflict of interest as required by Mass General Law. The town manager would generally appoint the assessor, and because her brother is in the running for this, she's asked that we potentially delegate this authority to the assistant town manager, Rachel Day.
That's it in a nutshell.
And do you, if you want to make any comments on that?
Not only that I've had no involvement in the hiring to date of this position, and the board approved a similar disclosure and request for exemption several years ago when the same brother became hired by the town in the assessor's office.
Thank you. And we also have counsel here present if anybody needs any advisement. Otherwise, I would be looking for a motion from one of the board members to delegate Rachel Day the authority to appoint the assessor.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call vote. Matt Fee.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Melissa Murphy.
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, just tiny point of clarification. The assistant town manager will not actually be making the appointment. The finance director makes the appointment, but it is subject to the approval of the town manager. So that will go to her.
Excuse me. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you.
There's one final item under your report.
So the 2021 annual town meeting and town election timeline, there's a draft in your packet. I do need to complete it a little bit more with respect to some capital program committee items, but I wanted to point out a bit of an overview of this timeline to the board. So what I'm trying to do this year is include Capcom, FinCom, and select board meetings that relate to town meeting and or the election on one schedule. Because I'm finding that it gets a little tricky with lots of different schedules flying around. So budget meetings are in blue, capital related meetings are in green, and everything else is not in a color. To just point out, there's a number of usual items here. In 2 weeks, we're going to be reviewing preliminary fiscal 2022 general fund budget projections. They will be very preliminary because at that point, we will not have the first quarter of fiscal 21 in entirely, but we are trying to follow along with generally what our budget timeline has been. And then shortly after that, we would want to issue budget instructions to the departments. With respect, so that's just FYI on some budget items. With respect to town meeting, we will have our usual town council availability for citizen warrant article consultation. That will most likely be remote. And we will need to figure out a way where people can go on to some kind of a Zoom probably with town council, and we'll get that figured out. And then we have a series of, the usual meetings where the board will discuss town-sponsored warrant article potential. And Erica, if you can go to the next, let's see here. So this just is pretty much all the usual items. Things are a little tight this year because we haven't gotten to some of the usual things that we would have gotten to right now because of COVID. So we are a little behind in some areas, and we're working hard to catch up, amidst everything else that's going on. But I wanted to point out that I have heard loud and clear from the board that it does not like getting the finance committee motions the day or two before the board is intending to make its comments on warrant articles. So I have moved the finance committee finalization of motions up to, let's see here, there's, to mid-February rather than the end of February or early March. So they are, thank you, they are meant to adopt, FinCom is meant to adopt its motions by February 18th, and then the board would review and adopt its comments to warrant articles on March 3rd. So hopefully that will give you enough time to not be rushed in trying to figure out FinCom motions and your comments. So I just wanted to point those out. So I will be, again, updating this schedule. We'll get it online, and Capcom will probably have a more detailed internal schedule, but I'm trying to really keep this up to date online so that people can see when the various meetings are happening. And that's pretty much all I wanted to say about that.
Matt?
Yeah, the other note is you've got planning board motions around the same time as FinCom, and that's very helpful. If they can hit the same timeline, then we will be able to have informed, knowledgeable discussions down the stretch rather than scrambling.
Yes, thank you, Matt, for pointing that out. I forgot, I tried to work that in as well. And those things are highlighted in yellow at the moment because they might change a tiny bit. And I wanted to point out to the planning board and the FinCom that they're gonna have to, move quickly on their review process. Or, not delay at all. That was it.
Thank you. Under Select Board's reports and comments, we have our continued discussion and update as to Racial Equity, Race Relations Task Force and Community Forum.
I was a little delayed.
There you are, Rachel.
It took me a second, sorry. I have two quick updates to give you all. One is the status of the position for the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, coordinator, I think is the name of it. A quick summary of where we're at with this. The position was advertised on July 15th. The application deadline closed on August 10th. We received 51 total applications. And I believe our Human Resource Department has gone through the process of the very beginning phase. And I will walk you through what that was in a second. And 33 met the minimum qualifications that we're looking for. We are not completely ruling out all 51 yet. I'll go through that phase screening process in 1 second. We have a total of 7 people who we are involving in what we have as a 3-phase strategic, not necessarily strategic, but a plan for how we hire this position. The first phase is the application screening. And that consists of 3 steps. The first step that has already occurred, and that involves just the Human Resource Department. So there is only 1 individual in our Human Resource Department that received all 51 applications. They reviewed them, and they have developed a blind application spreadsheet where all applicants who have come in are listed, but there are no names. The candidates are identified by number. They have the listed whether they are on island, off island, what their education level is, work experience, and if they met the minimum qualifications. That was done by that only 1 individual, and I will give a huge credit to Teodora for not only developing this phase, but also for reviewing the application. She's done an immense amount of work for us to start that process. That was completed, and we are now on to step 2 in phase 1, which involves a 7-member group. So prior discussions that we've had is that we've involved members of our employee empowerment team in the process. And that group, which is we call NEAT, has identified 2 individuals that they voted on to be a part of the process. Those 2 individuals are Osaji Doyle and Vanessa Williams. We also have Denise Cronow, myself, Amanda Perry, a community member, Theron Singleton, and a select board member, Melissa Murphy, as well as our Health and Human Services Director, Roberto Santamaria. And tomorrow we will be meeting. We will be reviewing the spreadsheet as the blind application process, and everybody will have an opportunity to go through and indicate whether they feel they met the minimum qualifications has been indicated in the first step, and if they want to pass them on to an interview, as well as it's sort of a judgment call in some ways, whether they're doing it or not, because the first step that was done by Human Resources is very factual. This is the minimum qualifications, meets it or not. And then the second step that this group is doing is more, do we want to interview them based on experience, education, and a few other factors. This group tomorrow will also review a lot of the questions that have been developed or come in through the Council for Human Services, as well as our employee empowerment team. So they suggested some questions that we might want to ask these candidates as part of the initial screening and the application process. We will then look at those and create at least, or I'm sorry, not create, but determine what maybe 3 to 5 of those questions that have been suggested that we will have emailed to the candidates identified that we want to move on into the second phase, which would be the interviews. And they will provide written responses by, I believe it's September 16th. And then this group will also be able to take those evaluations in step 3 and review those written responses and again, rank those responses. And we will still have no identifying information on the candidates once we're doing this type of ranking. We then move into phase 2, which I mentioned was the interviews. And the first, we anticipate 2 rounds. The first will be whomever we identify meets the minimum qualifications. The 7-member group says, yes, we want this person interviewed and has reviewed their written responses to the 3 to 5 identified questions. They will then have a phone interview that will occur likely with this screening group and as well as Human Resources, even though Amanda is still technically on there. And then the second round, once that is done, we'll go on to an actual either in-person or Zoom, depending on kind of where we're at with whether they're on island, off island, and comfortable in person, COVID protocols as well. Once that has been done, we move into phase 3, where we will then create a short list of candidates. And that will be done through an assessment and finalization of who we think will be the top candidates that we want to move forward to be hired for the position. This is also where Human Resources will step back in on a stronger role and kind of review their references and help determine who we might make an offer to. That entire kind of phase is done in a very nice little chart that Teodora developed for us. And we will be putting it on the town website so people can see that process in a little bit clearer way than what I just outlined so that it has a better understanding. I know one thing that we heard loud and clear is people really wanted a little bit more transparency in how we're hiring for this position. And I think it will really map out and give a clear understanding of what that looks like. And we do have a new page on the website. That's my second update. It is, if you go to the Town of Nantucket page and you type in promoting racial equity in the search line, it'll come right up, but you should be able to find it fairly easily. And right now we have 2 items on there. We will be adding this on there, but we also have the select board statement to the community that was adopted on June 24th. And there is a timeline of diversity, inclusion, and equity of events. So it's not only efforts that the town has done so far, including posting this position, but it also includes events that have occurred in our community that have impacted our efforts on this. So, the African Meeting House incident in March 10th, 2018, it includes that along with some other items throughout the process. So people can kind of see how we got here and what we've done so far. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions?
I'll also mention there's been a lot of back and forth with the RFP. It is basically ready to go. One thing that we're realizing, it is a very large encompassing scope. There is a lot that is being asked in this. It is also very detailed. Most are not as detailed as this. And I think a lot of that is because we've had so many different groups and individuals review it. So one of the things that we're definitely starting to recognize is it might make more sense. I know we've sort of gone round and round. What do we do first, the RFP, the position, and vice versa? And I think our recommendation has ultimately been that we're going to hold off on the RFP until this position is in place. So this person can review it, work through the advertising, be a part of the selection process, and be the one that's managing it overall. The more we look at it and see what the scope is and what the deliverables that we're asking for, it really is somebody's full-time job. So we want that person in place to take it. We don't want to have to award a contract and then not have anybody to keep the momentum going. So if we have the person in place, then that will certainly ensure that that does not happen. That's all I got.
Thank you so much. That was a lot.
Thank you, Rachel.
Matt?
Just a question, is this process sort of the blind process to start going? Is that something we're adopting townwide for other positions, or is it mainly for this hire?
It's something we've discussed doing overall for every position going forward. We're testing it obviously with this position. This will be the first one that we apply this to. And we are finding that it is actually quite helpful, and it is a very different process than what most people are used to, but I think it will be adopted going forward.
But then if we get to that point, I think we should make sure to really discuss it, because there may be unforeseen consequences. When you read about places like Harvard and Yale and other places, if they went blind, what would happen in their choices? And also from an equity standpoint, if people who have privilege are going to have great resumes, they're going to hit the minimum qualifications, they're going to breeze right through. Whereas other people who have life experience and or sort of have maybe not had as much privilege may not. And so I think sometimes you think you're doing something for the right reason, and it may lead to the wrong result. And so I just think it'll be good to test it here. I think this is a perfect time to test it. But I think there are some issues that we really have to think long and hard about how we do it.
I agree. And I do believe that's why I wanted to make note that the very initial first step in the beginning phase, it looked like 33 of the applications would be meeting the minimum qualifications, but we're still having the entire group kind of flush through all 51. And that way everybody else's opinion and what they're valuing and ranking might be a little different. Obviously there is an interview that occurs that's in person, so that sort of drops the blind part of the visual per se, when you start to get a little bit more identifying information. But by that point, you're a little far in the process. Also, we are starting to apply it here. I agree. Every hiring process always has room for improvement, and we have added it as part of the RFP discussion. So I think that'll also be where we kind of fine tune that process.
Any other questions, comments? Are there any committee reports tonight? Christy?
Thank you. Just a quick one. NPDC has been meeting virtually. So our last meeting, we reviewed a lot of different bike path options with Rob. And so looking at Tom Nevers and Sparks Ave and Orange Street. So it's still very much kind of in the planning stages, but it was nice to kind of see the layout and how these will be put into place over the next couple of years. And we also had a large discussion on economic development and kind of what all of us think that means. So some think it's, trying to shift from construction to a new industry. Some say, it's an and. How do we add more industries to our economy and diversify our economy? We talked about if there's a need for a full-time position, something that we've noticed over the past couple of months with different grants and things coming down from the federal government or state government, was not really having an economic development coordinator with the town, or kind of that type of economic policy person. So that was something that we discussed as well. And so just something that maybe we could discuss as a select board, or something to put on the agenda for the future. I also think this is something that Mermain has talked about with Janet and myself when we're doing the economic impact study, was to also kind of figure out if there might be a more longer term study that we could do to look at our economy. So I think some of those things might be coming down the pipeline as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Christy. I have a little update. I received the applications for CPC, And we really didn't got a much lower amount of applications than we have in recent years, totaling just under 1.8 million in requests. So I think that that's very much COVID related. And we'll be starting that review process soon. Anybody else?
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Matt Fee,
Aye.
Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow morning.
Thanks, Don.